Hey guys. This is part 14 of What If Naruto Died and Became a Hollow. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 55, Una Máquina de Huecos. Are you sure you want to do this, Sarutobi? Shinji asked. The old visor nodded his head, his back turned to his friend and de facto leader. He wouldn't have called his life since becoming a visor boring, but he felt obligated. Not so much for the Soul Society, but for the people he knew and loved during his life in Konoha. I'm positive. Are you sure I can't change your mind, Shinji? All of you. Hiruzen looked around at the other visored. They all shared solemn looks. Shinji raised an eyebrow, and then sighed. Not a damn chance, Hiruzen. Aizen is dead, so this doesn't have anything to do with us anymore. I'm sorry, but you're gonna have to fly solo on this one. I know you still have an attachment to that place, what with your friends in life. But we just can't go with you this time. Hiruzen nodded. I understand, he said, disappointment writhed throughout his voice. Shinji didn't say anything as the old man stepped out of their warehouse hideout and into the light. Suppress. Brujeria. A somewhat injured Zamari did not look happy as he was forced to release his Zanpakuto after being ganged up on by 7 separate vice captains at once. In fact, he looked downright livid. His mouth was turned down into a sneer as he was wrapped in a smoky ryatsu. The 7 vice captains tensed and dug their feet into the shingles of the roof as he changed, and his ryatsu got heavier. What is this? Renji asked himself, and while he was perplexed over Zamari's resurrection, he also took the time to note the other vice captains around. Himself, Hitsugaya, Hinamori, Ranjaku, Omida, Ida, and Isane. Those were the vice captains who had decided to attend the meeting, and consequently the ones who were forced to fight the Arrancar. All in all, not a bad lineup, but for some reason Renji wished he had more. What do we do, Renji? We've barely managed to injure him, and he's bound to get stronger in his release. Ibe called out from the side. Renji glared over at him. I know, okay. We need use all of our strengths at once if we want to stand a chance at defeating this Arrancar. Pour all your ryatsu into your Zanpakutos and be prepared for what's coming next. I have to work together with you scumbags. Omida Marekio piped up from the side. The rest of the group ignored him, as Zamari was just emerging from the smoky ryatsu. His resurrection wasn't the most intimidating thing in the world. He looked like a man projecting out of a pinkish pumpkin of sorts covered in sets of eyes, but that didn't mean the vice captains let their guards down. They still had no idea what he could do in this state. He spread his hands apart, and the eyes on his palms and several more on his body began to light up. The 7 vice captains tensed, and there was a quick burst of light that they couldn't even react to. Renji had anticipated that the light wasn't anything good, so he was the only one who was able to react and avoid whatever it was that Zamari had just fired at them. The eyes on the Octava's body stayed lit up, their pupils stayed intensely dilated, even as Zamari broke his stance and did not fire off any more bursts of light. What happened? Renji asked, more to his comrades than Zamari. The other 6 of them looked around at themselves, but they couldn't sense any apparent change. Zamari smiled an evil smile, before he hissed at them. A shame. It has already happened. It was at that point that Renji noticed something bizarre. Omida, Hinamori, Ranjaku, Hitsugaya, Nanao, Ibe, they all had one thing in common. The strange black markings that had appeared somewhere on their bodies. I have managed to capture 6 of the 7 of you. A pity. I had hoped to finish this in one attack, Zamari noted. What do you mean, captured? You haven't done anything yet, Renji called out. Zamari simply sighed. You don't get it, do you? I suppose an apt demonstration is required, the Arrancar said, closing his eyes and concentrating ryatsu into the 6 eyes that were apparently glowing. Raise your right arm, number 1, he responded. He exerted ryatsu on an eye in the top right half of his chest. Over on the other side of things, Ranjika raised her right arm, her sword pointing dangerously at the others. Renji noted that Ranjika's right arm was the one that held the strange sun-like symbol. "Yay? What's going on?" the confused woman stated. Honestly, that question was what all of them should have been asking, especially when they saw Ranjika swung her sword at Hitsugaya. "What are you doing, Matsumoto?" Hitsugaya called out. He was unprepared for the direct strike from his comrade, but he still managed to avoid it even as she came out swinging. "I don't know. My body's not listening to me," she cried back, going in for a second strike. Stop!" Hitsugaya cried out, preparing to bounce away from the slash. Zamari raised his eyebrows, and Hisugaya's left leg buckled out from underneath him as he was about to dodge. He lost his balance and fell onto the ground, and could do nothing as the oncoming Zanpakuto came in on him. Blood erupted from his mouth and chest as the sharp blade slashed Hitsugaya clean through the torso. He flopped to the ground uselessly, near dead, his eyes bulging in terror. His hands trembled heavily, as they moved to clutch the leg that had failed him. Blood continued to leak from his wound, but the only thing Hitsugaya was concerned about was his leg, which had refused to obey him, and had essentially caused him to sustain that injury. "Hitsugaya!" Renji shouted, while the rest of the vice-captains suddenly became very concerned about how they were going to win this battle. It had gone from 7-on-1 to 6-on-1, and according to Zamari, he had most of them under his control. "Have you grasped my abilities yet, pitiful vice-captains?" Zamari asked. He hadn't lifted a finger ever since he gained control of them. None of them answered, and instead just stared at the espada warily. "I will tell you. My ability is called Amore. Amore allows me to steal the sovereignty over any object I want. Every single thing in the universe has something that reigns over it. My Amore allows me to change it and take control of the sovereignty myself. For example, the limbs of your body," he pointed out, motioning to Hisugaya's leg. Renji seemed to have figured out that he was the only one who wasn't underneath the control of Zamari. "Well, you still haven't been able to control me," he roared. "Howl Zabimaru!" he shouted, activating his shuriken once again and swinging the extending blade towards Zamari. Zamari stared stoically at Renji, before Hinamori flashed into existence right in front of him and blocked Zabimaru with her own tobium. "Hinamori!" Renji cried out. Zamari smiled. "I forgot to mention this, but if I take control of the head, then the entire body does my bidding." Indeed, there was a sun-shaped marking on Hinamori's forehead. Her eyes, however, were darting back and forth in confusion and fear, as she realized what was happening. "Ayabarai-kun. I can't see control any part of my body," she squealed. Renji knew it was coming, but he was still unnerved by how Hinamori's body moved underneath Zamari's control. Hinamori shrieked in alarm and despair as the Amore ability forced her to raise both of her arms, swinging wildly at Renji. Renji avoided the strikes easily, but he was still struggling on how to attack back without injuring Hinamori. "Tobium!" the controlled Hinamori shouted, a ball of fire charging in the tip of shuriken. Renji grunted in irritation, but fell back even as 3 of the other vice-captains held the Rouge vice-captain down. "All of you!" Renji cried. "How are you able to move underneath his control?" he asked. He recalled that the Arrancar had gotten all of them save him, so at the very least they should have one of their limbs incapacitated. The 6th Division's vice-captain looked down, to Omiata's right leg, Iba's left arm, and Ranjika's right arm. There was a single similarity between all 3 of them. On the affected extremities, there were clearly self-inflicted wounds that created small gashes over where the tendons were. "You guys," Renji said, biting his lip. They had cut their tendons and made one of their limbs essentially useless, and they were moving about at a much slower pace because of it. Hinamori shrieked and threw all of them off her through Zamari's command. Then, she put her own sword to her neck, causing the others to pause in their renewed effort. "Don't move! Any of you!" Zamari roared from behind the entire group of vice-captains. Tears began to run down Hinamori's face, as her grip tightened around her sword. "I will end this myself," Zamari said. He clasped his hands together, even though he did not have a sword anymore. Resurrección Segunda Etapa, Brujeria. As Zamari activated his second release, the vice-captains knew that it was almost hopeless for them. One of them had already fallen underneath his control, and as his Ryatsu increased significantly, they had no plans. My Sonido is among the fastest of all Arrancar. Zamari began speaking, as his body began to morph once again. Yet when I enter my first release, I sacrifice a great deal of my own mobility for the power of Amore. In other words, my Sonido is no longer the fastest once I enter my release state. Obviously, a weakness like that should be considered unacceptable. The pumpkin-like abdomen began to disappear. And through entering my Resurrección Segunda Etapa, I can eliminate that weakness, and regain the speed that I had previously lost. With my Sonido and the power of Amore, I have no weaknesses. The pumpkin had disappeared completely. Growing over it in its place was bony material that had already covered his torso. His legs were covered in eyes too, but they had a sleek, mobile appearance which was vastly different than before. A row of spikes circling his hips and groin protected the eyes from being attacked. And I can fire my Amore at a much quicker rate. He flashed out of existence. Renji deflated, as he could barely pick up on where the Octava Espada was going to appear next. In fact, Zamari apparently wasn't going for him right now, as he darted right in front of IBA. His dark-skinned hand obstructed IBA's view, as the eye in its palm fired another burst of light. IBA was caught off guard by the Espada's speed, and could do nothing as his Amore attached itself to his head, giving total control over his body. He began to move, much like Hinamori did, though he was still clearly in control of his mind even as his body disobeyed. Ugh! Damn it! He screamed in frustration, attacking his own comrades from every possible angle. Zamari seemed to have him tuned onto Omida in particular, and the bulky vice-captain was already hindered underneath the weight of Zamari's Amore. Bankai! Renji had clearly had quite enough of the cowardly tactics of the Arrancar, and activated his Bankai in the face of overwhelming odds. 2 of his 6 comrades had fallen underneath the Arrancar's spell, 1 was incapacitated, and the rest were partially underneath the spell. It was time to stop holding back. Stop it, Abarai! Ie called out. It was too late. Renji had already activated his Bankai in full, bringing out the bamboo snake king characteristic of Zabumaru. The gigantic snake roared its battle cry, looking towards its master. Renji himself was dressed in a baboon fur-like shawl, his right arm turned into a monkey's hand, which was clutching the hilt tail of the giant bamboo snake. Hihio Zabumaru. Renji didn't seem to get to do more than show off, because Zamari was behind him immediately after his pose, firing Amore after Amore. He hit 3 segments of the snake, not attacking Renji himself in the slightest. A very poor decision. Bringing out a Bankai such as that which I control will cost you, all of you dearly, Zamari remarked. The snake seemed to struggle in place, before directly obeying Zamari. Even though Zamari hadn't hit the head, it was like the Bankai's entire sovereignty was stolen just by being hit on one of its segments. Zamari noticed this. Interesting. It seems that this creature is regarded as one being, despite the fact that it is made of multiple segments. It certainly makes my job all the easier. And with that, the Bankai turned on its master. It slammed down, and Renji cried out in alarm as his giant Bankai impacted the ground near him, nearly shattering the roof of the building in half and flinging shingles every which way. Abarai! Ibe cried out, still extremely handicapped due to the lack of control over his body. He couldn't do anything. None of them could. Ugh! Ibe yelled. While he was calling out to Renji, the other vice-captain's Bankai had taken the opportunity to swing its tail across the side. Without even being able to move, the 7th Division's vice-captain was helpless as the tail slammed into his side, knocking the wind out of him and throwing his body off of the roof. IBA! Renji shouted. And then there were 4 of them. 4 of the original 7 were the only ones capable of fighting now, and by the looks of things, 3 of them were completely incapacitated. Renji seemed to realize that enough was enough, and moved to call back his Bankai. Nothing occurred. It was completely underneath Zamari's control. Shit! He called out. The snake roared again, and Zamari surveyed the remaining vice-captains. Hinamori, Iba, and Hisugaya had been incapacitated, which left just Renji, Nanao, Ranjaku, and Omida. Of those four, only Renji was not underneath the Espada's control. Abaraifukutechu, please call back your bankai. Nanao called out to him. She at least didn't bring her Zanpakuto, so it wasn't like he was at any risk of suddenly being slashed at. Nevertheless, he would have to watch out if she started lobbing Kido at him. I can't. His ability won't let me, he called out. The controlled bankai began to attack again. It bucked and thrashed in place, even as Zamari began to control it. He chuckled. It is no use, my lowly vice-captains. Most of you are already underneath my Amore, and the fourth member of your crew has had his abilities nullified. I think it would be best to surrender at this point, and understand that you have lost. And let Soul Society be overrun with you Arankars? Not a chance, Renji shouted back. I admire your zeal, but tell me, what can you possibly do at this point without your Zanpakuto? Try me, Renji roared, grabbing the hilt of his Zanpakuto. Zamari grimaced as Renji picked it up, and through a method that Zamari did not understand, he regained control over it once again. Split! Hihio Zabumaru! The snake roared before its Ryatsubans broke apart, and the bamboo snake burst into its component segments, each one acting individually in and of itself. What is this? Zamari cried out in surprise, as he felt control being lost over the bankai. Actually, that wasn't quite entirely true. As the segments were hovering around in midair, he found he could control just 3 of dozens of segments. The ones with his Amore symbol on them. He had gotten careless. You thought you could take control of my bankai like that, didn't you? If you had gone for the head and taken control of that, you could have probably controlled the whole of it. But you didn't. Instead, you simply took control of a few small segments of the entire bankai. Renji pointed out. Wait, don't tell me. Still confused on why my bankai was obeying your commands. It's simple, I staged it, Renji yelled. I purposefully moved it to where you wanted it to go, to give you the idea that you were in complete control of it. Zamari looked livid once again, and all of the eyes across his body opened once again, flashing their purplish glow as they began to target Renji himself for the first time. Die! Take it! Take your stupid bankai back and succumb to my Amore! Zamari shouted, firing blast after blast of Amore. Renji simply levitated one of his bankai's segments to shield him. The downside for him was that Zamari gained control of one more part of his bankai, but there were still many more where that came from. He concentrated his Ryatsu, and the segments hovered over Zamari. Higazeku! His expanded bankai's version of his Shurikai's special ability loomed over Zamari's head, magenta spears of Ryatsu forming where the bamboo segments were once. This pathetic Amore! Zamari shouted, firing all his blasts of Amore as the disbanded pieces of Ryatsu. Pure Riryoku didn't seem to be something that he could control, however, and his Amore failed to steal the sovereignty. The blades of Ryatsu thrust down on Zamari, even as the Octava drew himself into his defensive sphere. They impacted the outermost portion of his sphere, puncturing the hide. Blood leaked from the sphere. The attack was powerful. Much more powerful than it had been 10 years ago, and Renji was no longer a vice-captain level Shinigami, regardless of whether he still held the rank. Well done, Abaraifukutechu, Nanao pointed out. That Arankar's arrogance was his downfall, and he has paid it. Feeling is already returning to my limbs, and I can see it is the same with the rest of the still active vice-captains. This is unforgivable. The sphere that was Zamari shouted, while blood leaked out of his body. The sphere retracted like petals falling off a flower, and the streamlined form of Zamari's segunda etapa emerged. Yet, he was heavily injured. You're still alive? Can't say I'm surprised, Renji said. The Octava Espada was furious, far more so than he had been before, but roughly half of his eyes had been disabled. You're gonna pay for this. I've had enough of toying with you. Prepare to succumb to my Amore, and be used to kill your own comrades throughout Suriidii, he roared. You don't get it, do you? Nanao piped up. The dark-skinned Arrancar made no indication that he heard her. He fired a desperate Amore towards Renji, but a Bakudo-type Kidu sprung up around Renji, blocking the Amore. "You've already lost. Give it up," Renji said, as the remaining 4 vice-captains fell into line with one another, slowly and dreadfully walking towards the wounded Zamari. "No! I will not lose to lowly vice-captains such as you!" he screamed. He tried to use Sonido to get away, but he was so heavily injured that he was rendered immobile. The vice-captains did not change their expressions, as all of them, even Nanao, drew their swords. The 4 of them hovered over Zamari, whose Amore was now completely useless. They all raised the swords above their heads in unison, and slashed them down on Zamari. The swords sliced the Octava Espada to ribbons, and a torrent of blood flowed out onto the rooftop as he was butchered into smaller and smaller pieces by the remaining vice-captains. "You're dead, kid." Grimmjow wasn't smiling as the air itself began to burn, but he knew instantly that once that air became hot enough, the battle between him and Hitsugaya would be over. "See, your bankai is melting. Guess your captain commander didn't realize that some of his soldiers would be negatively affected should he try and use his bankai. But it doesn't matter." "Hitsugaya Taishu!" a Shinigami shouted at him. The voice sounded rather weak, considering that the rest of his squad was getting manhandled by Konohamaru. Nevertheless, Hitsugaya did not pay any attention to them. He was more concerned about the water dripping from his back, as the ice from his bankai became completely useless water. Grimmjow also seemed to be affected by the power of Yamamoto's bankai, but he didn't suffer any drop in his abilities by being near it. With Hitsugaya in nothing but his sealed state, the captain was hopelessly outclassed by the Septima. Hitsugaya looked for any exit he could, or any attack he could use in his sealed state that would help him fight this Arrancar. Meanwhile, almost all of his men had been decimated by Konohamaru. He stared at Grimmjow, who was charging up his Ryatsu, and he struggled to figure out what to do. Before he could even react, the speedy Arrancar entered his guard without a hint of hesitation. The child prodigy captain was promptly slashed down. Zanka no Tachi. Naruto's breathing began to increase dramatically, as the air around him began to heat up significantly. Being this close to Yamamoto's bankai, it was like he was inhaling fire. Nevertheless, the true form of Yamamoto's bankai was not very impressive. Usually, bankais are something large and impressive, but Naruto saw that all Yamamoto was holding was a short katana, heavily scorched by fire. A dim flame was rising up from its blades, and appearance-wise it did not look all that threatening. The heat in the air seemed to tell a different story. When Yamamoto activated his bankai, Naruto felt several Ryatsus disappear at once. "Damn, Zamari's down too, it looks like. I'm more shocked at the Ryatsu level of those who defeated him, but I guess he let his arrogance get the best of him. Still, that leaves just 7 Espada now. I wasn't expecting to lose that many," he commented to himself, even as another captain's Ryatsu disappeared from over where he felt Grimmjow's Ryatsu. "Are you just gonna sit there and stall? Your captains are dying left and right, and we've just about beaten you. If you truly want to win, you'll have to take me out right here and right now." "Whoa!" Naruto grunted in alarm, as Yamamoto swung his sword at him. Using his full speed, he dodged to the right. It did not touch his body, but the blade did clip the edge of his robe, and a large portion where it touched was instantly obliterated. There were no flames. Naruto whistled, but when he opened his mouth he coughed on the heated air. "D-damn. Just being around you makes me feel like I'm going to lose. I'm not even sure I have a response for this," Naruto said. He would just have to dodge at this point. "Zanka no Tachi, Higashi, Kaio Kujitsujin," Yamamoto cried, slashing at Naruto yet again. The sword impacted into the ground, creating a giant crater after it obliterated the stone the instant it touched it. Naruto was nowhere to seen. "Sero Corazon." Naruto slipped inside his guard, his cutlass glowing a deep orange. "Zanka no Tachi, Nishi Zanjitsugoki," Yamamoto roared, though nothing happened. Naruto felt his Ryatsu rise, but there were no changes. Regardless, Naruto steered away his attack on Yamamoto, and used Sonido to dart away from Yamamoto. When he touched down around 10 feet away from Yamamoto, he grabbed his sword and slashed a deep line in the stone. 10 feet away from Yamamoto, he would have to retain his distance. That bankai, it produces so much heat that his signature flames are not visible anymore. He incinerated the hem of my robe with such heat that it can no longer produce flames. He's wreathing himself in that same heat right now. I can feel it, it's burning me up. But if I so much as touch him right now, I'd be obliterated. Shit! Naruto cursed, as Yamamoto began to attack once again. A flurry of strikes almost too fast for Naruto to comprehend came at him, as Yamamoto wielded his blade with an incredible amount of expertise. And Naruto had to avoid them all. One slightest little touch on any area of his skin, and he would be obliterated instantly. He doubted even his incredibly tough hero would be able to stand up to this level of heat. He contorted his body from left to right, and ducked underneath multiple strikes, not even daring to parry with his sword. Yamamoto swung out a foot which hit Naruto in the gut, and the Primera Espada found his hero breaking underneath the powerful strike. His attacks were fluid, and there was absolutely no wasted movement by the Captain Commander of Soul Society. Naruto wanted to make an experiment. Listlessly, he fired one of his normal orange Seros at Yamamoto. The Captain Commander did not even bother dodging or deflecting the blast. Rather, he just stood in the center of the area. The blast impacted with Yamamoto, but the heat around him was so great that he even managed to incinerate a Sero. That's one effective shield, Naruto muttered to himself. He jumped into midair, trying to get a better vantage point with which he could attack. Perhaps he had to. Perhaps not, though. He just had to wait for the important moment, and at that point, everything would be tipped in his favor. He just had to stall Yamamoto for the time being. If he fell, then the old Shinigami would be free to stick it to the rest of his forces. He gripped his sword. Perhaps he could manipulate the Ryatsu around him. He focused in on Yamamoto's Ryatsu from his perch in midair, and it nearly seared his entire core. With Yamamoto's Shurikai, he had felt a slight heat as he manipulated the Riryoku, yet his Bankai's Riryoku was a searing heat far beyond that. It seemed that manipulating it was dangerous even to the one in charge. There was no way Naruto could manipulate it if that were the case. Sero Venenoso! He shouted in midair, firing the glob of poison down upon Yamamoto. Like with the previous Sero, the poison was burned away by Yamamoto's wreath. He latched himself onto the roof of the 1st Division's barracks, scrambling along the shingles as he attempted to get to a better place to fight. The balcony wasn't working. He needed a more open area. A massive chimney lay before him, and the Primera Espada used it as shelter to shield him from the oncoming Captain Commander. Speaking of which, the Captain Commander himself had taken to the roof, his sword hanging at his side. He already knew how to attack Naruto. Zanka no Tachi, Higashi, Kyo Kujitsujin, he roared as he attacked. While his other attacks did not produce any flames, this was one different. It was still as hot as the others, but with the blast came a pillar of massive horizontal flames that barreled toward their target. Naruto was able to pick up on them this time, when he felt the heat from the Riryoku begin to barrel its way toward him. He winced and grimaced while still hunkered down by the massive chimney, and he knew that the stone structure was nowhere near resilient enough to shield him from the oncoming blast. The blast of fire and heat bore through the chimney where Naruto was hiding, but Yamamoto's eyes narrowed when he felt a spike of Ryatsu coming from where Naruto was. He had attacked the Arrancar, and should have seemingly incinerated him, but that wasn't what the leader of Soul Society felt. He was always able to feel the Riryoku behind his attacks, but when the blast of fire impacted the chimney and incinerated it, it was like it was not there anymore. His eyes were telling him similar things. It was like the blast of fire was being fed into the mouth of a massive void, and disappearing into its depths. Whatever the case, he knew that his last attack had not been effective against the Arrancar. The smoke and dust concealed Naruto from view, but Yamamoto knew from the strong Ryatsu that the Arrancar was still up there. And he seemed different. At one point, he had the Ryatsu that Yamamoto was used to feeling throughout the fight. Then, for a few seconds, there was a gigantic spike in his Ryatsu, similar to when a Shinigami moved from Shurikai to Bankai, but as soon as it had arrived, it was gone, and was back to where Yamamoto had felt it earlier. Hot damn! That's some incredible Ryatsu. It was so hot, I thought I was gonna burn up from feeling it. Woo! Naruto's voice resounded from down below. It was a lot different than when Yamamoto had heard it earlier, much more deranged. But is that all? I'm afraid you will no longer have access to your bankai at this point. Naruto whooped, as another new face warped into the space directly behind Yamamoto, catching even the ancient captain off guard. Wonderweiss! Naruto ordered. The young-looking Erincar left behind from Aizen's era had entered his resurrection, the strange extinguer that made him look resoundingly alien. The old captain swung his sword to the left, aiming to exterminate the Erincar before he could even get in the sneak attack that he had been so apt to have done. Wonderweiss reached out a white hand and grasped the blade of Yamamoto's Zanpakuto. Where the Erincar should have been obliterated by the captain's bankai, nothing of the sort had occurred. He could only watch as his bankai hissed from the heat, yet as soon as he touched the Erincar, he knew that any attack power had left his Zanpakuto. The modified Erincar simply needed to touch his Zanpakuto once, and with that, his job was over. He did not make any move to attack Yamamoto, simply hovering in midair as Yamamoto punched him away with his free arm when he did not attack. Wonderweiss was not fazed. Naruto was walking out of his hiding place, a slight twitch in his eye. His hair was messy and unkempt, and his eyes were wide with bloodthirst and lunacy. His sharp teeth were bared. What did you do? Yamamoto asked, his voice calm. However, he was gripping his useless Zanpakuto in his hands furiously, but no fire welled up from within. Naruto continued to twitch. Oh, that? Well, I guess it'd be alright to tell you what happened. You see him. He pointed dramatically down at Wonderweiss, who was lying motionless on the balcony below. He's a remnant of the time when Aizen ruled. Aizen managed to develop the first and only modified Erincar. With that, everything else was removed from him for one sole purpose: neutralize Yamamoto Genryo Saishi Gakuni's Zanpakuto. I see. Aizen has left some very nasty devices for you to work with. However, he shot up, crashing down onto the roof, sending wooden splinters flying everywhere. His fists were cocked, their muscles bulging as he abandoned his Haori to compensate for a much more physical fighting style. I have led the Soul Society for over 1,000 years, and in that time there has been absolutely no one who has been able to surpass my abilities as a Shinigami. Losing the ability to use my Ryujin Jakka does not make me helpless, boy. Yamamoto snarled, his fists clenching as Wonderweiss got to his feet without so much as a fuss. Naruto snickered, his twitching not subsiding yet. Ha! Well, you SNRRK can't just sit there and SNRRRK expect to fight Wonderweiss. Now isn't SNRK the time for that, you know. We've got a status quo to upkeep, so... Naruto hissed, as he leapt down from his perch and crashed directly in between both Yamamoto and Wonderweiss. It'd be one thing to fight Wonderweiss, but do you honestly expect that you can beat me without your Zanpakuto? Yamamoto said nothing. He didn't even show any signs of emotion, other than complete determination in defeating his foe. Ikatsu. There was nothing fancy about Yamamoto's punch. No technique more than a straightforward punch that went sailing towards Naruto as the Erincar went on the offensive. Yet, the punch was so quick, and so strong, and Naruto knew the type of damage that Hakuta from the Captain Commander of Soul Society would do. Just as the punch was about to hit, Naruto directly sidestepped the punch using a combination of agility and Sonido, but even the wind from the punch was strong enough to disorient Naruto slightly. Naruto swung his cutlass at the bare-handed Yamamoto, directing a flurry of slashes with the intent of killing him. The Captain Commander skillfully managed to avoid or counter them all, though his bare fists were not sufficient enough to touch Naruto's blade without getting injured. Yamamoto grunted as Naruto reared back and shoved the hilt of his sword into his stomach, sending the old captain skidding back several meters. His trained eyes turned to the sky immediately when he registered movement. Naruto was overhead, prepared to swoop down on him, using the sun overhead to try and blind Yamamoto. Sero Corazon! He roared, as the hilt of his cutlass glowed orange once again. He swung down in midair, a jet of orange Sero zigzagging down towards Yamamoto. The old captain avoided it as the bladed Sero cut a line directly through the enormous balcony they were. He then ducked underneath a swipe from Naruto, which created yet another trail of Sero where he cut the air. However, he left himself open. Sakatsu! Yamamoto roared, putting both of his hands together to make a powerful double punch that likely would have killed even Naruto. The Primera Espada put up his sword to block the punches as both fists impacted the blade. The energy of the Sero on it seared Yamamoto's fists, but the pressure almost snapped Naruto's Zanpakuto clean in two. Arg! Naruto snarled. He was pushed back by the Sakatsu, but regained his balance fairly easily. The old man still was very capable even without his Zanpakuto, but it was only a matter of time now. The fires around Tsunade crackled in the background, and Naruto couldn't help but make a little jab at Yamamoto. Does it bother you? Seeing your precious Tsunade in such a state? Several of your captains are dead by now, but you must really have a heart of ice if you can shrug off their deaths so easily. Wonderweiss moaned over to the side. Well, you're able to hold your own at least, but it won't be long now. I might as well finish this, he said. With my third and final form of Sero, he finished, sheathing his sword. He clapped both of his hands together, before pulling them apart. Strings of orange Riryoku connected his palms together, and as he twisted his palms in a rotation, the strands of Riryoku became more like a spiral. Sero Espiral. Before he could release the Sero, something occurred. Just like with Wonderweiss, a new figure appeared on the battlefield out of nowhere, though the new arrival merely stood there, and did not attempt to take either of the two fighters. When Naruto saw the figure, his face lit up in a wide smile. When Yamamoto saw it, his face blanched. Ulquiorra! Naruto called out, as his second-in-command brushed off his robes from the recent Sonido, and calmly regarded both his ruler and the leader of Soul Society. He said just one thing? All of the keys have been gathered. Naruto grinned evilly, but this was also the first time in the battle where Yamamoto showed even the slightest amount of fear. If his Zanpakuto were not disabled, he likely would have incinerated Ulquiorra on the spot. You! How did you know about that? Yamamoto asked. Ulquiorra didn't say anything. Allow me to explain it to you, old fucker. We know the purpose of those keys that you have spent the last 1,000 years keeping your captains in the dark about. But we have the information. Naruto cackled. Tell me, do you remember a hollow named Reporo? He asked suddenly, a sinister smile widening on Naruto's face. Yamamoto didn't know what he was talking about, until the memories flooded back. Yes, that legendary hollow. He invaded the Soul Society all those years ago. He managed to steal the keys from the captains, but I managed to stop him from fulfilling his goals. Don't tell me. Reporo is long dead, but his legacy still echoes throughout Hueco Mundo. Naruto started. He pulled 2 keys out of his pocket, one with the number 2 and the other with the number 11. You really should investigate Hueco Mundo more often. I know you Shinigami believe us to be nothing more than a conglomeration of mindless hollows, but we are so much more than that. We leave legacies just like humans, and before Reporo died, he wrote a book, which he hid in his legendary empire for anyone who might stumble across it. And that someone happened to be me. That scum, he detailed the things he discovered during his incursion. Yamamoto commented. I really do have to thank him. The book, El Libro de Ciclos, documents practically every aspect of hololife, and was a travel journal of sorts for Reporo. We have managed to crack the secrets of Arancarization thanks to him, but more important, we have discovered what purpose those keys hold. He sighed wistfully. If we hold on to them, they can change everything. Naruto shot his hand out, catching a massive punch from the disabled captain, whose face was a picture of pure rage. You're getting ahead of yourself, boy. Those keys are an important tradition within Soul Society that allows for the balance of power to be maintained within the branches of Soul Society. Without the Royal Guard, you cannot fulfill your purpose. Without the Royal Guard, you cannot even enter the palace where that machine lies. Yamamoto roared. Naruto only smirked. Don't you worry about that, old man. We've already got it covered. In fact, look. Naruto pointed. Yamamoto didn't want to give this tricky hollow any leeway, but out of the corner of his eye, he saw a massive pillar making its way down from the heavens, on clear course to the Soul Society. The Tenchurin. This cannot be. Naruto looked like Christmas had come early. So, Sakura made do on her promise. We can advance to the royal palace. Naruto shouted. With a cry of victory, he roared to the heavens, a hollow-like roar that reverberated through the Soul Society. The others have arrived, Naruto. Ulquiorra commented. Yamamoto's eyes widened when 5 more shadows touched down in a straight line next on either side of Ulquiorra. Stark, Haribel, Nitra, Grimmjow, and Yamy. The 7 remaining Espada had officially gathered in one spot for their final rendezvous with the Spirit King. Those that had been released had dropped it beforehand. Most of the divisions have been wiped out. Multiple captains are dead, Ulquiorra said. Behind Yamamoto and Naruto, the pillar crashed into the ground into the balcony, prepared to take the 7 Arrancar into the other dimension. And once they were there, the regular army could be brought in. For the first time, Yamamoto looked completely lost. It's over, Yamamoto. Soul Society is finished. You've lost, old fucker. Naruto guffawed, as he twisted the Sero energy from his Sero Espiral in his hands. He held Yamamoto in place before the old captain tried to avoid the attack, and prepared to release it. There's still something that bothers me, though. Throughout this entire invasion, I have not seen anyone I recognize from Konoha. It's almost like they're not here. Oh well, I guess I can hunt them later. See ya, Naruto said cheerfully. Yamamoto brought his arm back, going in for one morikatsu. Naruto sidestepped once again, and grabbed his wrist without so much as a fuss, the energy still swirling in his hands. He released the vortex that was a Sero and moved away as it embedded itself in Yamamoto's chest. The old captain glared at Naruto, defiant to the end. Without Ryujin Jaka, he was outclassed. Naruto was faster than he was, and had enough agility to avoid or counter any of his Hakuda. But he would not drop his pride in front of this brat. The Sero began to rip at him as the energy rendered asunder, and the Sero expanded further and further as a vortex of pure Riryoku, which was strong enough to nearly rip the surrounding balcony around to shreds, with everything in its way being destroyed. And Yamamoto was directly in the center of it. Chapter 56, Pilar del Cielo. As the Sero Espiral consumed the Captain Commander of Soul Society, the Arrancar knew that they had won, and the Soul Society knew that they had lost. Naruto Uzumaki had managed the impossible, what no one had managed to do in over 1,000 years. The whole of Soul Society stood silent as the orange tempest raged over the First Division's barracks like an ominous storm, and the surrounding stone and wood began to peel away from the force. The 7 remaining Espada watched the scene unfold, as Yamamoto flopped around in the vortex of orange energy. The old captain's face was a mask of stoicism, even though the Sero rendered him asunder. Naruto was the exact opposite. He was grinning like a lunatic the entire time. The vortex raged for about a minute, before the orange energy of the Sero finally dispersed, and the balcony was completely in ruin. Naruto and the other Espada watched in pure silence, even as the Sero dissipated, and Yamamoto's body flopped onto the ground. He had been sliced clean in two, but the commander of the Shinigami had died, never allowing the pride of the Shinigami to be tarnished. Regardless, the strongest Shinigami had died. Naruto chuckled, before his chuckling turned into full-blown maniacal laughter, as he darted up and kicked the dead Shinigami in the face multiple times. How does it feel, old fuckhead? I beat you. I beat your Soul Society. I beat the Shinigami. You guys are all dead, and Hollows are on the verge of taking your stupid paradise. He cackled once more, and even Grimmjow and Nitra started to laugh at their greatest triumph thus far. Haribel, Stark, and Ulquiorra merely stood in stony silence, while Yamy also began to laugh stupidly at Soul Society's expense. All around them, Soul Society burned. Even now, the main Arrancar force was going around slaughtering any non-captain level Shinigami. Many of the captains were dead already. The Shinigami had lost, and the Hollows had won. It had taken him over 300 years, but Naruto finally managed it. He had finally destroyed the Shinigami, and to prove it, he had personally killed their leader. Yet there was still one final piece to the puzzle, which would be Naruto's biggest trial yet. Alright, there are 7 Espada left. Zamari and Szayel bit the dust, and Barragan betrayed us, so I had to put him down. Not the result I would have liked, but we can still easily accomplish our goals with this many left. And now, our ride has arrived, Naruto said, addressing the other 6 Espada. The Royal Guard is strong. They are few in number, but they are strong. Fortunately, we will have as much help as we need, and it won't be necessary to kill the Royal Guard at this point. You just need to keep them out of the Royal Palace. As Naruto spoke, the doors to the large pillar in front of him opened. A young-looking woman with pink hair stepped out of the vehicle. Instead of the Vandenrake robe she wore earlier, she was now dressed in a white haori, with the symbol being 4 stars. It signified that she was a member of the Royal Guard. Sakura, Naruto muttered. He wasn't happy to see her, but at least she got the job done quickly. The other Espada didn't bat an eyelash. They already knew the purpose that Sakura brought them. So nice to see you again, Naruto-kun? Ooh, and look. It feels a little bit sad, but you've managed to successfully kill Yamamoto Genryusai Shigekuni. And do I see fire in the background? By golly, you've really managed to tear Soul Society a new asshole. She raised her fist. We're not done yet, Sakura. We've got all the keys, but they won't be of any use if we are not able to defeat the other members of the Royal Guard. You're the kid expert. Do you have the main garganta prepared? Yes, your army is free to come in at any time, as soon as we arrive, she giggled. Naruto growled at her behavior. Having someone near him as psychotic as himself could get annoying. Let's go. We can't back to the Royal Palace dimension this way, but fortunately the trip back isn't very problematic, regardless. We'll just have to take Shibakukaku's cannon by force. That's the way the Tenshurin can make it there. Let's see, 7 of you are making the trip. There should be plenty of room. Naruto nodded, much more subdued than in his celebration of his victory, but the other 6 Espada boarded the Tenshurin without a fuss. As the doors closed and the pillar took to the sky, the surviving Shinigami of Jiraiya were left to wonder just how they had lost the battle. A blanket was placed over the dead Yamamoto Genryusai's head. 2 captains stood over the fallen Shinigami, their eyes tinged with sadness. Those 2 were his first students, Kuraka Shunsui and Yukitake Jeshiru. They had both suffered moderate wounds from their battles with Stark and Harabel, but they were able to move like normal. Those 2 Arankar were far too merciful. Yamaji, Kuraka said. There was none of the usual pep to his voice. This time it was nothing but pure sadness. Yukitake didn't say anything, but his expression was the same. Regardless, both of them were extremely troubled by what Yamamoto's death would bring. What do we do now, Kuraka? Yukitake asked rhetorically. He already knew the answer. Soul Society has lost. But those Arankar are still out there. They're trying to take the Royal Palace. We just have to have faith in the strength of the Royal Guard, while staying behind and rebuilding. That's all we really do now. We're no match for them. Yet if the Royal Guard fails to stop those Arankar. He paused for a second, letting it sink in. We're all doomed. I would still like to know just where they came from. There was no indication of anything like this occurring. I thought that with the death of Aizen, there wouldn't be enough power in Hueco Mundo to directly challenge the Soul Society. And the Royal Guard. I saw the Tenshurin arrive not too long ago, and the remaining Espada boarding it. How did they manage to do that? Perhaps there's a traitor in the mix? Kurako offered. It was a troubling thought for the both of them, but it was the only possibility that they could think of at the time. It couldn't have come at a worse time either. Now that the Konoha Yukitake was cut off, as a garganta opened in the space where the wrecked balcony stood. It was wide enough to accommodate hundreds of people, which was the perfect amount for the Konoha Association. This doesn't sit right. All of a sudden we're invaded when a prime force of ours is gone. Speaking of which, it seems they've made it back here, but too little too late I suppose. Yukitake commented, as the garganta opened wider and wider. Kuraka-san! Yukitake-san! The voice of their fellow captain Namikaze Minato rang out as the blonde-haired man exited the garganta that had been set up for them by Valakav. He had spotted the two senior captains the moment he had exited the portal, but it took him a few more minutes to notice the cold body that was at their feet. "Ah, Minato. We're glad you're back," Kuraka said, half-heartedly. Minato would have smiled at them, but his eyes were trained on the dead body of their leader that currently rested at their feet. Several other prominent members of the Konoha Association exited the garganta, and had a similar reaction to Minato when they first locked eyes with Yamamoto's corpse. What happened?" Minato asked, still in shock. He didn't want to believe that his son the Hollow was currently the leader of a group of invaders, but it became pretty clear when he regarded the state of Jiraiya. Their leader lay dead, many buildings were demolished while corpses littered the street, and many areas of the Jiraiya were on fire. It was madness. When they left, it was in perfect condition. Now, it looked like the apocalypse was upon them. Soul Society was an absolute wasteland. "An invasion," Kuraka said, pointing out the obvious. "The Espada live on. They were biding their time, waiting for the right moment to strike, despite the fact that Aizen is long dead. We weren't prepared for them, and it cost us dearly. Yamaji was killed by their leader. Several other captains have been killed, and Kuratsuchi Taishu has been permanently disabled. This was an invasion we may never be able to recover from." "I can't believe it." "So Taishu," Kushina piped up. Her face was a mess of turmoil, for she had a sneaking suspicion who had killed Yamamoto and plunged Jiraiya into such turmoil. "Where are the Arankar now?" "We don't know how they did it, but they somehow took the Tenchurin to the royal palace. They are not satisfied with destroying Soul Society on its own, they are going after the Spirit King's head," Yukitake explained. "What?" Kushina screamed. "We can do nothing more now than trust in the power of the Royal Guard to stop them. We have no way of following them or even getting in contact with the Royal Guard, but if they should somehow fail—" "Kuraka-san, Yukitake-san, we intend to go after them," Minato pointed out. The rest of the Konoha Association stared at him dumbly, even his sensei and wife. "We do?" Jiraiya asked stupidly. "Why?" Kuraka asked. He wasn't in the mind for games, none of them were. "If I must admit something, I believe we all feel a certain amount of responsibility for allowing this to occur. We may have been played, but that doesn't change the fact that we were out hunting an elusive hollow in little more than a revenge hunt, while Soul Society was in its time of need. That is shameful in and of itself, but there's also the matter of what we have learned in our excursion into Hueco Mundo." Minato trailed off. "Which is?" Minato and Kushina's eyes were downcast, and the two senior captains noticed the change in atmosphere within the group. "The leader of this group of hollows, and the one who had planned this invasion, he's my son. Vulpes C, otherwise known as Uzumaki Naruto. We've been looking for him for so long, and we finally found him. It just wasn't what we were expecting the result to be." "It's alright, Minato-san. It's not your fault," Kurosaki Ichigo said, as he too stepped out of the garganta and laid eyes upon the captain commander of Soul Society. "This is a troubling revelation, Minato. He is the one who you have been searching for all this time?" Kuraka commented. "Don't feel like you have to take responsibility for any of this. What's done is done. We can't blame any single Shinigami for allowing this to happen. But we were played for fools. They coordinated this attack to happen while we were gone. We need to go after them," and with the Royal Guard, he trailed off, before he finally seemed to realize something. "Akane and Taiki are there. There's a good chance that Naruto will run into them. We need to go and support them," Minato gushed. His son and daughter were members of the Royal Guard, and if the Royal Guard were to be fighting the Arankar, I see that nothing can be done to stop, regardless of Soul Society's rebuilding phase. However, there is more to this than simple politics. I do not know how the Arankar have managed to invade the royal palace, but it should be clear to all of you that Shinigami of the Godai 13 cannot enter that dimension as they please," Yukitake said. "Not so fast, Yukitake. While it is true that Shinigami of the Godai 13 cannot enter the dimension at will, It is true that the Godai May 13th send a distress signal to the Royal Guard in times of crisis. Whether they decide to respond or not is up to them, but at the very least it is something that may open the way to the royal palace. And it just so happens that Yamaji got desperate enough to send a signal to the Royal Guard not too long after the invasion began. Kuraka piped up. Are you serious, Kuraka-san? Kushina asked. She had heard of a rule like that, but she couldn't recall when the signal had ever been used. In fact, except for when her children came back on their very rare leave, she never had any contact with the Royal Guard or the Spirit King's dimension. I don't know if they'll come or not, though. They may already have their hands full with he was cut off, before his eyes turned to the skies overhead. Well, speak of the devil. Just like shortly before, a long white pillar became visible soaring through the sky, though it was clear that this one was not full of traitors and or Arankar. There was no way they were done invading the dimension. The new Tenchurin behaved in an eerily familiar manner to the first one. It almost impacted at the same exact spot where the first one had landed and had taken the 7 Arankar to the royal palace. They're actually here, Yukitake said, not bothering to hide the surprise in his voice. You would think that all of them would be a little more occupied at the moment. Like the Tenchurin from before, the gigantic pillar opened, and the Konoha Association gasped in awe as they laid eyes upon members of the Royal Guard. For some of the higher-up members such as the Namikazes, Shikamaru, Kiba, and company, a light smile made its way on their faces as they saw the 2 figures descend from the pillar. Helpful allies had come their way. Hey, what's up, everybody? Things going well? A raucous male voice trumpeted from one of the figures, and the one on the right stepped out into view. Read the scene, idiot! Does this look like everything's going okay? A much calmer female voice chastised from the left figure. She too stepped out into view. Akane! Taiki! Minato called out. He would recognize his children's voice from anywhere. The red-haired twins' step came into view of the Konoha Association, some of whom regarded them with awe. After all, they were the greatest pride of the Konoha Association, but they were rarely ever seen due to their status. Dad! Taiki called out, rushing up to his father. Akane, on the other hand, calmly walked up to her father, and with a serious look, she nodded with an acknowledgement of his presence. It was strange, the way the twins had grown up and grown different during their time in the Royal Guard. When they were kids, Akane had always been the hyperactive one, while Taiki had been a shy, calm, and rational boy. As they spent time in the Zero Division, it seemed like their personalities had switched. Akane in particular was much colder and calculating, while Taiki had turned wild. Are you all right? Minato asked. The twins looked confused. Why wouldn't we be all right? Taiki pointed out. Because, you don't know yet, do you? Kiba said, regarding the 2 twins. We don't know what exactly? Akane asked, her eyes narrowing. We came here because Soul Society requested our help, and we're the only ones who agreed to go. We didn't expect to see Soul Society in ruin, nor all of you here with us. What happened? Minato sighed. Sit down, you two. This is a long story, and we don't have much time to tell it. So much is at stake here. First of all, let me be the first to tell you that Soul Society has been destroyed, and we were not here. We were in Hueco Mundo, idiotically hunting down a targeted hollow, who at the same time is the one responsible for this entire disaster. We just got back. We know about your proposed invasion. You were planning on hunting down Vulpes C, but we didn't realize that you guys were all ready to do it. Taiki pointed out. That's not all. What I'm about to tell you may come as a big surprise, and something you may not want to hear. We've been searching for your brother for a long time now, and you're well aware of the lengths we'd go to find him. Akane's eyes snapped open. Naruto? Our brother, does that mean you found him? She asked. She had a bad feeling about where this was going. Kushina burst into tears again, and many of Naruto's friends began to look solemn. Yes. Vulpes C, the one who destroyed the village of Konoha, is also the mastermind behind this entire invasion, and by the looks of it, he succeeded. Vulpes C is Naruto. Vulpes C the Hollow is your brother. Minato finally choked out. The 2-0 division members stood there in stunned silence. Even Akane's mouth was hanging open. What? Taiki spluttered. Yukite and Kuraka had not said a single word during the entire monologue by Minato, but even they had to weigh in on this state of affairs. That boy you've been looking for so long, your son, he's behind all this. The son of a captain. Yukite commented. So all this time we've been looking for a hollow. Judging by his actions, it's clear he has no love for us. Akane pointed out. Based on what he's done, we're going to have to kill him, she said, with no hesitation. She had never even met her older brother, so she didn't have the same reservations as her parents might. Minato, Kushina, and Naruto's old friends winced at the blunt revelation. That statement was likely very true. Naruto chose his side over 3 centuries ago, and he hadn't looked back ever since. It just wasn't a thought that they liked to think about. Where is he now? Akane asked, her voice dangerous. That's just it. Kuraka piped up. You came at likely the worst possible time. Since they have already finished invading the Soul Society, there's one more possible destination for those Erankar. The Spirit King. What? We can't hang around here, after all. We need to get back to our duties, immediately. Let's go, Taiki! Akane ordered to her brother, who frowned at her, but didn't necessarily disagree. But what about everyone here? He asked. No time. I know we haven't seen everyone in such a long time, but our Lord needs our assistance. We probably shouldn't have even left our cities, because our mistake may cost everyone in this world. Akane wasted no time in climbing back into the Tenchurin, without even saying goodbye or anything to her parents and the rest of the Konoha Association. Wait, Akane! Minato called after her. This could have been their one true chance to pursue Naruto, and they were not about to let it fall from their grasp. Akane stopped in her tracks, but otherwise did not acknowledge Minato's voice. Take us with you. All of us. We want to confront Naruto. Dad, as much as I respect your skills as a Shinigami, you know as well as anyone that unauthorized Shinigami are not allowed inside the Spirit King's palace. Not to mention, we cannot fit so many people inside the Tenchurin. Even if I granted that request, only about 10 or so members could fit alongside us in there. Then just take as many as you can. Please, Akane. We feel responsible for this. Kushina piped up. Maybe we should take them along, Akane. This invasion doesn't sit right with me. We may need all the help we can get. Taiki commented, to his much stricter sister. Akane sighed. Fine, we'll take this along. But if things go south quickly, you're going to take the fall for this, got it? She told her brother, who nodded with an idea of seriousness. We leave immediately. We cannot waste any more time here. Who knows what may be occurring in the royal palace while those Erankar are there. The other members of the royal guard are strong, but judging from the destruction around Soul Society, there has never been an invasion like this. I have a bad feeling about this. Minato nodded to his daughter, before turning back to the rest of the Konoha Association, which were huddled up on the balcony of the First Division, looking solemn. Needless to say, no matter what happens from this point on, things will never be the same. Naruto has done irreparable damage to the Soul Society, and in a way we are the ones responsible for it. But we must do whatever it takes to stop him. All of you back there, he was gesturing to the bulk of the Konoha Association. Those who had never known Naruto in life, and had come to Soul Society long after Pain's invasion. I cannot drag you into this. You accompanied me to Hueco Mundo, and for that I am thankful. But I think it would be best for all of you to stay behind and help with the rebuilding of Jiraiya. Kushina, Jiraiya-sensei, Tsunade-sama, all of Naruto's friends from Konoha. I would be very thankful if you were to accompany me to the Spirit Palace. If we all confront Naruto himself over this, we may have a chance at winning. You don't need to say anything, Minato. All of us feel the same way. We want to stop Naruto, no matter what it takes for us to do so. With that being said, we will accompany you to the Royal Palace. I would like to come along with you, Minato-san. I have gone far too long without seeing the human world or soul society. I don't want them to be destroyed, Ichigo pointed out. Minato regarded him carefully, before nodding. Then let us hurry. Akane piped up. No more time for conversation. All of you who are coming, please step inside the Tenchurin. We will have to travel to the Shiba complex, and using Shiba Kukaku's cannon to reach the royal palace. We have no time to waste. With Kiraku and Yukitake watching, and the majority of the Konoha Association waiting behind, those who would decide the fate of Soul Society stepped inside the Tenchurin. Minato, Kushina, Jiraiya, Tsunade, Rin, Hinata, Shikamaru, Kiba, Neji, and Ino, along with Ichigo. Those 11 would assist the royal guard in their endeavor, along with Akane and Taiki. Akane herself sighed one last time, before closing the door to the large pillar. The remaining Shinigami watched as the pillar took to the sky, rapidly in pursuit of the renegade Naruto. Chapter 57 Multitude. The citizens of Rukongai did not even know what was happening. It had been a weird day for all of them, and at the end of it, they were confused. They had been taught for their entire afterlives that the Suriidai was untouchable, that no one could defeat it. Yet, the Suriidai had duly been defeated. Quite soundly at that. And now, with the Suriidai in shambles, they were stunned when they saw a large white pillar soar across the skies like a divine chariot, followed by another identical one only hours after. It seemed that it was in hot pursuit of the previous one. Within the pillar, there were 12 different Shinigami, each one of various strength and skill levels. Yet, they all had origins that traced back to the same village. Minato, Kushina, Jiraiya, Tsunade, Rin, Neji, Hinata, Shikamaru, Kiba, and Ino, along with the royal guard members Akane and Taiki. Everything seemed okay within the pillar for them, other than the fact that it was slightly cramped. I hope nothing bad has happened to the Shiba, Hinata pointed out. It was fairly rare for one as quiet as her to initiate a conversation, but nonetheless she said something that had been on all of their minds. Knowing the nature of these Arankars, I have a bad feeling about them. Shiba Kukaku has a nasty temper, and when someone like Naruto intrudes on her property demanding the use of the cannon, it won't end well. Besides that, there's no way that she will willingly lend aid to creatures such as Arankar. Neji responded to her. The Tenchurin continued to soar across the upper districts of Rukongai, the tension in the air forcing them to not create any conversation past that point. Eventually, the strange sight of the Shiba complex came into view, though it wasn't like they could miss it. What was more bothersome for that was the fact that the house as well as the giant stone hands that served to decorate the area were all in ruins. The Keikaku cannon was the only thing that remained intact. There was no sign of another Tenchurin. Oh crap, looks like we were too late. We can only hope Shiba Kukaku is still alive at this point, because if she's not, we may be in a bit of a bind. Jiraiya commented. Bring it down, Akane, Taiki said. Akane did just that, pressing a few buttons on the dashboard, which killed the power to the Tenchurin and brought it down onto the lawn of the Shiba complex. The dozen Shinigami all exited the vehicle, while a few of them stayed behind to tend it in preparation for the launching back to the royal palace. Akane and Taiki, along with their parents, entered the ruined Shiba complex. The halls were in severe disarray, and many priceless Shiba artifacts were thrown off the wall. The 2 bodyguards and servants of the Shiba complex lay either dead or unconscious, and the Namikaze family proceeded down the hallway with a heavy heart. The sliding door to the main room of Shiba Kukaku was sliced in half, and the wood and paper that decorated the door were ripped and thrown apart by the chaos. Wasting no time, Akane entered the room. Her brother and parents followed not long after. They were met with a chaotic scene similar to the one that had occurred outside. Asshole. How dare that asshole do this? Kukaku-san! Taiki exclaimed, shocked the grisly scene. Genja lay over to the side a ways. Apparently he had tried to fight the Arankar. He was unconscious or dead, but they didn't have enough time to figure out which. Kukaku was in bad shape, however. Taiki, Akane, what are you two doing here? And why are Minato and Kushina here as well? Kukaku asked. The normally fessity woman lay heavily injured in a pile of her own blood. Minato could already guess what had happened. Naruto or another Arrancar had done this. They had probably demanded the use of the Keikaku cannon, and when the temperamental Kakaku decided to give them a piece of her mind, Naruto lost his patience. Kakaku obviously would be no match for him. What happened here? Taiki asked, cradling Kakaku's body gently. The woman grit her teeth together ferociously. She seemed more angry than she should be considering her injuries. Arrancar. As 7 of them. They arrived here just hours ago using a Tenchurin. I thought it would be you two considering no Arrancar's ever been able to use that vehicle, but it was Arrancar. And a traitor to the Zero Division. Anyway, they demanded the use of my Keikaku cannon. They wanted to storm the royal palace. Obviously, I refused, but their leader, he did this to me. And using the strong Kidu of the traitorous member of the royal guard, they have managed to use my Keikaku cannon. They are in the royal palace right now. A traitorous member of the royal guard. Who would do that? Minato asked. Akane and Taiki also seemed rather interested in this type of news. A traitor to the royal guard would definitely make this invasion far more possible for the Arrancar. As Sakura. Hirino Sakura is the traitor. She was in league with those Arrancars all this time, and with her Kidu, there's no way they wouldn't be able to invade the royal palace. What? Sakura! Kushina exclaimed, her mouth hanging wide open. Sakura was apparently Naruto's teammate in life, so Kushina had trusted her. She had always seemed a little aloof, but not the type of person who would think of betraying the Soul Society. Sakura, she's the newest member of the Royal Guard. The Spirit King thought there should be some expansion, and the consensus was that Hirino would be taken into the guard. A Tenchurin disappeared right before we came down here, but we didn't bother to check who had left before coming down. The new Royal Guard member, this is a disaster. Akane mumbled. Anyway, Sakura's betrayal is not important right now. We're on borrowed time as it is. Kakaku-san, we are very sorry to ask this of you in such a state, but there is a troublesome thing occurring right now. We'd like to go to the royal palace as quickly as can be. Taiki told her, his voice one of authority. Troublesome things, huh? Well, I sure do love troublesome things, but not at the cost of getting me nearly killed. I really am boiling with hatred of those Arrancar. Allow me to do everything I can to help you in your mission. We are all very grateful for your bravery and your determination, Kakaku-san. We will not let you down this time, Taiki told her, before letting her down gently. Kakaku winced slightly as she tried and struggled to bring herself to her feet, her determination not failing her where her body did. I swear I'll get the lot of you up there to the royal palace. Just promise me one thing. Promise me that you'll really stick it to that blonde asshole while you're up there. I owe him a smack. And boom! We're done. Your army will be arriving shortly. There's no way my comrades will be able to ignore such a massive wave of hollows able to threaten the Spirit King. Though, I hope you're prepared for a massive loss of numbers while you're here. It doesn't matter. Valakav should be able to raise the morale of them regardless of how many are lost. I'm more concerned about what happens if any of these guys are attacked, he gestured back. The other 6 remaining Espada stood steadfast. The other members of the Royal Guard had probably been alerted to their presence, but it was far too late for that. The invasion of the Royal Palace had officially begun. This was a very large area for a pocket dimension, and Naruto had never really seen anything like it before. They were currently floating on a disc that suspended high above the vestibule road far below, but the disc was not some small flat expanse. Rather, it was an entire city, with many empty buildings high above the expanse. There were several other discs floating high above the ground, each of which contained their own city. The disc they were was Sakura's own personal city, her own personal quarters that had been granted to her just a couple of days ago. Naruto looked off into the distance. There was an enormous cylindrical building directly to the northwest of their position. That was the Greater Soul King Palace, and it was where the Soul King resided with his family. It was also the place that Naruto had been longing for, and where he would finish his lifelong goal. All 13 keys were in his pocket now. Sakura's city was quite unique, and different than the other cities that floated around the Soul King's dimension. It was very sleek and metallic in design, giving it a very futuristic feel to it. There were flashing lights of multiple colors hanging above the doorways to the buildings, which were unoccupied. The only purpose they served was to provide safe facilities for which to practice and experiment with new kinds of Kiddo. The main building at the center, a large dome-like structure, was where the Arrancar and Sakura currently resided. They were on the top floor, where the walls consisted of nothing more than a domed window, which granted them a full view of the Spirit King's dimension. A panel was the only thing that was set up in this room, at the center of it. There was a groove which looked like it fit Sakura's hand perfectly, with several lines that glowed with a blue energy running up it. Naruto and the other Espada watched Sakura work in stony silence. This was all part of the plan, and was the reason why Velikav and the rest of the Hollow Army had remained stationed within Hueco Mundo, waiting for their chance to be useful. The other non-Espada Arrancar were left to clean up the mess in Jiraiya. It was already done, but when Sakura had put her hand in that panel and channeled her Ryatsu, there was a change that occurred. Based upon the spike in her Ryatsu, she was using some kind of Kiddo, one that Naruto and the other Espada recognized immediately. The garganta. It was how the Hollow Army would get here to the royal palace. As soon as Sakura placed her hand inside that panel and chanted the Kiddo, there was a rumble that resonated throughout the entire royal palace. It wasn't just a regular garganta. It was a garganta that was on a much larger scale than any garganta the Hollows had ever seen before. This Shinigami had managed to take the garganta and magnify it tenfold. It's done now. The garganta is open. We are prepared to storm the royal palace and turn the cycle. I will accompany you on this, and it's up to you to decide whether they, she pointed to the other Espada, will be coming too. Yes, you stupid bitch. We are ready. You guys will all be coming with me. There's no real enemy to fight here, and once we get the cycle turned, everything will be ours for the taking. The key to our success lies within the Greater Soul King Palace. Let's go. How lame. We're just gonna go there without fighting anyone, Grimmjow complained. Ulquiorra shook his head at the bloodthirsty Arrancar. Yeah, I want to kill more people as much as you, Grimmjow, but as long as we're here, we need to fulfill the objective as soon as possible. It's very likely we may run into strong opponents on the way, though. Vestibule Road leads directly into the Great Spirit King Palace, but be careful not to run into any other members of the Royal Guard on the way. They'll be distracted by the Hollows, Sakura explained. Yeah, let's just go, Naruto snarled. With a quick flash of his sword, he broke the surrounding area, and with his Arrancar air walking technique, he stepped outside into the windy torrent. The moment he did so, two things happened at nearly the exact same time. The first was far more beneficiary to his cause. He saw the black void of the garganta open, but what a scale it was. The portal covered like skies like a shroud, opening up to reveal the empty space of the garganta void, which housed millions of hollows within its depths. No doubt the royal guard was locked onto that void now, for from within its depths, it began spilling hollows. Thousands of hollows spilled forth from the black void to land down on Vestibule Road far below. And there were many hollows that made up his army. There were regular hollows, Jillians, Ajuchas, along with hollows of all shapes, sizes, and abilities. When they landed, they did not waste a single second. They stormed to the palace at a rate that a force of that size could realistically do, but their main concern was not to take the palace. Rather, when speeding dots emerged from the other cities and traveled down to Vestibule Road. Those speeding dots were taking out dozens of hollows at a time, but it wasn't enough to slow down the invasion force. The Royal Guard is down there. Individually, those hollows don't stand a chance, but with their numbers they can at least keep the Royal Guard from getting to the Soul King. It's taking all they have to keep them from breaking into the lower sanctum. This is where we come in. We'll breach the upper sanctum. Let's go, Naruto cried. With the lower level of the dimension occupied by both sides almost fully, Naruto and the Espada were easily able to attack the upper level. There was a long, wide stretch of levitating stone that led to the palace far above the Vestibule Road. It was also where they had parked their own Tenchurin. When Naruto and his minions were running along the white stone road leading to the upper sanctum, the second surprising thing occurred, in quick succession to the arrival of the hollows. A second Tenchurin came rocketing across the sky at a high rate, darting past the 7 errant car and 1 Shinigami. Sakura's eyes widened as she picked up on some stunning Ryatsu. Shit! That's Akane and Taiki. They must have left not long after me to go to Suriidai. But that's not all. I'm sensing some very strong Ryatsus coming from within. Sakura pointed out. Shit! Naruto, I have something to tell you about that Tenchurin. All the people that are in it, it's your family, and your old friends from Konoha. Naruto stopped in place, just as he about to enter the Greater Soul King Palace. The Tenchurin impacted heavily upon the wide road they were on, right next to the Tenchurin that they had landed on the other side of the road. Naruto's eyes were wide, and he rubbed his mask fragments while fondling with the cutlass at his side. His brain was throbbing furiously as the thoughts began to become coherent. Even Sakura gave him a wide berth as a slithering orange Ryatsu was emitted from his body. He chuckled darkly, his voice deeper than even Ulquiorra had ever heard it. Them, eh? What a wonderful surprise! I'm flattered, truly. Naruto cackled, his voice raised several octaves up from the chuckle earlier. He turned around, showing the other Espada his bloodshot eyes. His skin was clammier, and when he grinned, they swore they saw cruel sharp black teeth underneath his scowl. Everyone backed off, and gave him a wide berth as Naruto began to pace slowly but surely down the long road over to where the Tenchurin was. Before he could go any further, Sakura's arm grasped him around the neck. Stop, Naruto. There will be time for that later. Right now, you have to get those 13 keys into the top tower of the Greater Soul King Palace. Do that, and you can take all the time you need slaughtering them. Right now, let us handle them. You better get that arm off of me if you don't want to lose it. Naruto hissed. Even Sakura, with all her mental issues, managed to flinch at the tone in Naruto's voice. Naruto! She tried. Rarak! Someone roared, but this time it was not Naruto. The sudden roar seemed to break everyone out of their stupor as the Konoha Shinigami got out of their Tenchurin. No one on the Errancar's side said anything as the largest Errancar among them lumbered down the wide road towards the Tenchurin, huffing and puffing. He drew his Zanpakuto. Get pissed, Segunda Etapa Ira! Throwing caution to the wind, Yamy seemed to finally have enough of sitting on the sidelines. So he rushed the first targets he could possibly find, not caring about the wrath of the Primera later on. His sword exploded into a burst of red light as he drew it, and called his release command, but he was through with holding back. He was going to go Segunda Etapa from the start. Luckily, the road was very wide enough to accommodate his massive size and weight, but it wouldn't hold if he decided to start thrashing around like an idiot. That idiot! What's he doing? Naruto called out. Yamy's stupidity had thrust him right back into the real world, and he was no longer focused on just killing his family. Rather, he was livid over what Yamy was doing. Nonetheless, Yamy kept on doing what he was doing. He activated his second release, and using his large size, he covered the distance over to the Konoha Shinigami almost immediately. This is madness, Akane pointed out. When the Tenchurin arrived within the royal palace, they had expected to find an Errancar invasion of relatively small numbers, with those small numbers being particularly competent fighters. She didn't expect this. Thousands, if not millions of hollows were crowding the vestibule road far below where the Tenchurin landed. The Ryatsu was a cacophony of noise, but she could very clearly make out the members of her fellow royal guard far below. They were doing everything they could to prevent the palace being stormed, but it seemed that more hollows just kept swarming in. What is going on here? Ichigo asked, as he stepped out of the Tenchurin. Other members of the Konoha Association stepped out as well, with Minato and Kushina entering the Spirit King's dimension for the very first time. Is that? Ichigo trailed off, as he pointed down the very wide road all the way to the cylindrical building in the back. Right in front of him, there seemed to be people at a distance. I don't know how they managed to get those hollows here, but we made a mistake. We should have been here, Taiki pointed out. His sister couldn't help but agree with him. Minato's attention was drawn suddenly by Ichigo's proclamation. He wrapped his arm around Kushina, gesturing to the small figures off in the distance. There seemed to be 8 of them, but within that group, there would no doubt be Naruto. However, they couldn't dwell on this, as a particularly large errand car began to rush at them like he was mad. He jumped in the air as much as his large body would allow, before all of them felt a large spike in Ryatsu. Why? Kiba asked suddenly, as the Ryatsu covered Yamy, and his body began to morph. How troublesome, muttered Shikamaru, as the impact from a huge errand car rattled the road they were on, and almost made a couple of them lose balance. Why is it so huge? Jiraiya asked. He had never seen a hollow this big before, and the fact that Naruto had one within his army didn't comfort him. Besides, everyone in the Konoha Association could see the large, black 10 that was tattooed on the errand car's giant chest. It's an espada! They're here, everyone! Ichigo pointed out. I've seen that one before, but I don't remember him ever being this big, Ichigo stated. Several members of the Konoha Shinigami had already drawn their swords. Yamy was as big as advertised, but his second release added to his girth a little bit. The Decima looked a bit like a cross between an ape and a dinosaur. He stood on 2 legs, his chest very broad and muscular like an ape's, but magnified to an impossibly large scale. His skin was brown in color, similar to his first release, but his mask had changed. Now it covered almost all of his face, with 4 long spikes sticking out of the back end. Yaheh! You weak-ass babies get to die by the hands of Yamy. Here it comes! He roared, as he reared back and threw a slow yet powerful punch directly down upon the Tenchurin. Oh, for crying out loud! Taiki muttered. His Zanpakuto, a long katana at his hip, was drawn from its sheath. Its hilt was a deep blue, with the guard of it 2 curvatures that thrust out of the sword like wings. With a well-placed shunpa, he met the Decima in midair, and with a quick precision, he got in front of the large errand car. After he had done that, he managed to lop off the massive arm with very little effort. Whoa! Yamy cried out in pain. You weak little insect! How dare you! I'll crush you all! Yamy roared. If he had wanted to, Taiki could have finished off Yamy right then and there, but instead, he sheathed his Zanpakuto. This is a waste of time, and I'm not even going to bother. This should be something you could take of, alright? He asked, going to the back of the Tenchurin. Why didn't you finish him off? Akane asked her brother. Taiki grinned at her. I wanted to look cool, he proclaimed. Akane sighed. Anyway, I'm sorry. Dad, Mom, I apologize for this. It seems that right now the other members of the Royal Guard are trapped in a fight with what seems to be millions of hollows. We brought you here like you wanted, but now we have to go fulfill our duty and keep those hollows from invading the Greater Palace. You'll have to meet with Naruto without us, Taiki told them. Yeah, that's fine. We should be able to handle it on our own. Just go down there and help your fellows. This situation isn't looking very good, Minato told them. Without another word, the 2 siblings leapt off the bridge to the Greater Palace, and down into the endless mob of hollows. We'll try and finish up as soon as we can, and then go back you up if you need it, Taiki called back to his parents. Minato gave him a thumbs up. Now that we're here, what do we do with this troublesome errand car? Shikamaru asked, the question that was on everybody's mind. Yamy was still reeling in pain from the loss of his arm, but considering the number 10 on his chest, he seemed to be the weakest espada. He's coming again, Hinata commented. Indeed, the Decima Espada was starting to get over the loss of his right arm, and was preparing to attack again. We don't have time for this. Stand back, everyone. I'll do this, Minato told all of his subordinates. Everyone there, from Jiraiya to Kushina to Neji, stood back as they watched the former 4th Hokage and current 5th Division captain draw his Zanpakuto. It was a normal katana, the most common of all Zanpakuto. The hilt was a bright yellow, with a guard shaped like jagged zigzagging line that wasn't quite a lightning bolt. But within the core of the Shinigami powers, there was so much more. Gleam, Kuroi Senko. There was a bright flash of yellow Ryatsu that emanated from Minato's sword, showering the surrounding area in a pure yellow light. What the fuck? Yamy shouted rudely, covering his face with one of his massive arms. The rest of the Konoha Association looked in awe at the 5th Division captain and his legendary shurikai. The shurikai of Minato's Zanpakuto was very similar to his sealed state, if you were looking at the hilt. The hilt was the same as always, but where the blade once was emerged a long, slender beam of yellow energy, similar in structure to the Quincy Seal Schneider, though it was much more uniform, and unlike Seal Schneider. It was a pure sword and nothing but. Be bright, what do you plan on doing with that thing? Yamy asked. Minato didn't say anything for a few seconds before he addressed the Decima Espada. Sorry, Arrancar, but I don't have time to chat with you. My son is directly behind you right now, and I need to get to him as soon as possible. I will finish this up quickly. Minato grunted as he swung his sword diagonally, not even coming close to hitting Yamy. Yamy scratched his head for a couple minutes, before he laughed out loud. Ha ha! What was that? That why he cut off, before there was a burst of hot air followed by a beam of light which materialized directly in the center of Yamy's stomach. Blag! The Decima cried out, as the beam of light that materialized from Minato's sword punched a hole in Yamy that very nearly cut the gigantic Arrancar in two. Blood poured from the wound in buckets as the gigantic Arrancar lost his balance. With his big body, he flopped over the side of the bridge, landing with a thud down below, where the hollows were trying to move their way towards the greater palace. Alright, let's move on, Minato stated, reverting his sword back to its sealed state and sheathing it. The other Shinigami looked at him and shuddered, most of them anyway. That's one scary shurikai. That big guy didn't even stand a chance, Kiba commented. Be careful. That Arrancar was an espada, but from the looks of things, he was the 10th one. That means he was the weakest of all the espada. It's likely there will be tougher opponents from this point on. Right now we need to move. Find Naruto. Minato didn't need to tell them twice, as they noticed one of the Arrancar over on the far side of the road began walking to them. Minato's mouth went dry as the Arrancar came closer to them. He had spiky blonde hair. That idiot. Ulquiorra was as blunt as usual, but there was no denying to anyone there that what Yamy had pulled was incredibly stupid. The big Arrancar was incredibly stupid after all, and Ulquiorra supposed that it was only a matter of time before Yamy got tired of following Naruto's rules and just went out in his own. As a result, it had gotten him killed. Well, that was quite the display, Harabelle commented, a rare initiation of conversation from her. Honestly, they had seen the blonde man activate his shurikai from this great distance, and take out Yamy with barely a thought. That's my shitty dad. I knew he was always a talented Shinigami, but this was Yamy's own fault that he charged in like that. There was no avoiding the result. This wasn't the result I wanted, but whatever. We're here already. As much as I'd love to confront all those motherfuckers right now, I know I simply don't have the time for it. If the Royal Guard don't remain distracted by the Hollow Army, then this will all be useless. However, Naruto sighed before he stepped forward. Naruto? What are you doing? Sakura asked. I'm gonna go leave them a present, you see, Naruto said enthusiastically. Stay here. All of you, he ordered before he bounded off down the suspended bridge over to where the Tenshirans lay. The Espada sat there in stony silence. Naruto himself saw his hated family and former friends get closer and closer as he ran. The looks on their faces changed from indifference to shock and horror as he approached. He's coming. Naruto is coming! Kiba shouted out over the din, as they watched the blonde-haired, red-eyed Arrancar rapidly close the distance between them. The bunch of Shinigami murmured amongst themselves as Naruto slowed down significantly, to the point where his speed decreased to a slow walk along the road. He was very close to them now. No one said a single word, the tension in the air was thick enough to be cut with a knife. And when he arrived in full, the Konoha Association got their first glimpse of Naruto for over 300 years. They were surprised by how little he changed. All of them had at least aged somewhat, but other than the Arrancar changes, there wasn't much change in Naruto's appearance. Of course he had the mask fragments, and his eyes were permanently red now, but other than that he looked like the same exact 16-year-old that had died all those years ago. Kushina's eyes began to water, while all of Naruto's former friends began to gape at the errand car in front of them. Appearance-wise he was similar, but his demeanor and the way he carried himself were so different. When they looked at him, it was like looking into an abyss. He carried himself with such a mark of malice and death that it was practically washing off of him in waves. And Naruto. It's you. Minato coughed out. He didn't really know what else to say. Hinata burst into tears, while several of Naruto's other former friends just stood there with their mouths open. Me? Well, yeah, I guess it is me, Naruto said after the long silence ended. He noticed Hinata shuffle up to where his father was, and a red-headed woman that Naruto didn't recognize. Naruto, your mother and I have been searching for you for such a long time. And you're a hollow, Minato said awkwardly. So, that's my mother? Whatever, I'm still gonna kill her. Wow, everyone's here. Naruto whistled. Besides his parents, there was Ero Sennin, Tsunade-bachan, Shikamaru, Hinata, Neji, the works. It was a glorious reunion. Naruto, do you realize what you're doing? What you have done? Minato asked. Yeah. I've invaded the Soul Society, killed countless Shinigami, and have now invaded the royal palace. I've been wanting to do this for 3 centuries now. Of course I know what I'm doing. The way he said those things with such nonchalance made them flinch. But why? Why? That's the question, isn't it, all of you? That's why. I hate all of you so much, and you guys, he pointed towards the back, to where Naruto's former friends were standing. I saw it all, and heard it all, he stated dangerously. Naruto's friends looked at him, confused. Perhaps it didn't occur to you at the time, he said dangerously, as he paced around them all like a predator scouting out its prey. But I was there when I died, in Konoha. As a plus. It was a very short time I endured as a plus, because I became a hollow right after that. Does anyone want to guess why? He asked rhetorically. He had them all in the palms of his hands. No one dared say anything. Well, when I was an innocent little plus, I thought all of you were my friends. But then I happened to hear all that slander from those I considered precious to me. And to top it all off, I saw with my own eyes what that old fuckhead did to my dead body, how he mass-produced a load of living weapons, and you all did nothing to stop it. Do you remember that now, huh? He asked angrily. His former friends were staring at him with shock. He had been there to witness all of that. I became a hollow and channeled all of my hatred towards the village of Konoha. When the Shinigami got in my way of destroying Konoha, they became hated targets as well. But luckily, I have destroyed Konoha already, and am right on track with the second goal, destroying Soul Society, and all of you, he pointed to them, before he laughed madly. Naruto-kun! A normally shy, feminine voice spoke up surprisingly loudly. Naruto turned around, putting his back to all of them. Naruto-kun, look at me! Hinata scolded, tears welling up in her eyes. The errand car turned back around, regarding the girl that had a crush on him all these years. What? So you're saying, you turned into a hollow because of the way Konoha treated your honor? You could say that, yes. Naruto pointed out. His voice was becoming much quieter, and the rest of the Konoha Association was beginning to wonder what Hinata's plan was. Per Naruto-kun, you have suffered so much. Hinata cooed, her voice getting much quieter and softer. Naruto raised an eyebrow, before a look of bewilderment spread itself upon his face. What? Do you have any idea who I am? What I've done? He told Hinata, his voice cracking significantly as he raised it in volume. She's trying to appeal to him using pity and emotion. Naruto's a hollow. He doesn't understand these sorts of things, so he's getting very confused. He doesn't have any idea how to respond to this. Minato said. Honestly, it was actually pretty dangerous what Hinata was doing, but Naruto seemed to be getting out of it. He had no idea what to do. I don't care. To me, you'll always be Naruto-kun. You may have done many horrible things, but on the inside, you're just lonely and sad. You never wanted to become a hollow. If it were even possible, Hinata's voice managed to get even softer. The other members of the Konoha Association were on edge, but they seemed to be in support of what Hinata was doing, as Naruto's Ryatsu reached an all-time low, and he slumped to his knees. It was incredible. Hinata was disabling him with just her words. Naruto punched the ground in frustration. Make it stop. Please. Don't say anything more. To the surprise of everyone present, Hinata took a step forward. She went up to the fallen Arrancar and knelt down before him. She was beginning to cross the line, but the rest of the Konoha Association were too mesmerized to stop her. It's alright. Naruto-kun. You don't have to be sad anymore. All of the things you did, you can never put those things behind you, but you'll always have someone that cares about you. If there's any place for you to start over, then I would call Soul Society the perfect place. But I'm still a hollow. At this point, Hinata did the most surprising thing of all. She hugged him. It all happened at once, it seemed like. Naruto was on his knees, looking at the ground in despair, before Hinata just went up and hugged him directly out of nowhere. Naruto screamed. He didn't know how to respond, but Hinata shushed him with her words, cooing at him gently as he settled into her embrace. Minato was stunned. They were all stunned. Naruto was completely disabled. Hinata smiled, the look in her lavender eyes a look of endearment. Her arms were fully wrapped around Naruto, and as she held him, she felt something wet douse the fabric of her robe. Is he crying? Minato asked himself. There, Naruto-kun. It's alright, you don't have to do those things anymore. Hinata told him. Naruto sniffed, tears rushing down his face, before he nodded. Thank you? Hinata. I'm so, he trailed off, pulling his face from Hinata's chest. I'm so happy, he roared, locking eyes with Hinata. The look on his face was an absolute nightmare, and all of the tears that he had been crying before were gone. He was not crying. Hinata stood there in shock, as Naruto extended his arm and thrust his powerful fist straight through her chest. Chapter 58, Loto. Time seemed to freeze to a standstill. Hinata's eyes were dead, their familiar lavender hue looking up at them rapidly as they began to mist over. Naruto had thrust his fist directly into Hinata's chest with a horrific squelching noise, and she did not survive the attack. Had she still been alive, she would have paused to look up in the face of the former boy she had loved, and seen that the tender display of remorse had been replaced by the visage of a pure psychopath. But she wasn't even able to do that. Perhaps it was even merciful that she had died upon impact, the hole having been punched straight through her heart. Her dead eyes were frozen in a state of perpetual shock and pain, which she had realized in the final split second of her life. The dead Hinata made nary a peep when Naruto pulled his arm from Hinata's dead body, and the horrible squelching noise rang again. A vicious smile was on his face as blood began dripping down his arm in small droplets. He regarded the rest of his former friends before him. Practically everyone was in a state of shock. What a stupid bitch. Did she really think that trying to appeal to my humanity would just magically get me to renounce my ways? Though I'm still shocked that all of you just stood there and allowed it to happen. Don't tell me you all thought I could be redeemed as well? Free Kinori! Naruto had closed his eyes for just a few seconds, but as he did, he heard a voice packed with pure rage utter those words, and Naruto knew it immediately to be the command of a Shirkai. Stop it, Neji! That was Shikamaru's voice. Naruto casually drew his sword with no bit of hesitation whatsoever. Without even thinking, he put it up to his face to block a unique 5-pronged Zanpakuto that was apparently intent on taking his head off. It was a strange weapon. It somewhat resembled a trident, but with 2 extra prongs. The 2 extra prongs on the ends were curved in such a way that they stuck out from the middle prongs. Essentially, if Naruto blocked the strike, he'd have the 2 curved prongs pointed directly at his neck. Really? You're the one that gets the most upset over that? And you used to hate her so much back in Konoha. In a way, I guess you can say I'm finishing the job you tried to do 300 years ago. Silence! Neji screamed. Naruto had looked up boredly to see the other Hyuga clan member in the group attack him out of pure rage, when he saw Hinata slump to the floor the way she did. Free of any inhibitions, he had been the first one to attack Naruto, essentially getting over the fact that Naruto was once a beloved comrade within the village of Konoha. No one else had jumped into the fray to help him. Fly, Ajikajitsum. A burst of white Ryatsu emerged from the ends of the two curved prongs at the end of Neji's Zanpakuto. Like two missiles, they loudly rocketed off the rest of the Zanpakuto, and with the way they were positioned, they were to stab right into Naruto's neck from opposite sides. Quick as a flash, Naruto brought his sword up and blocked both of them at the same time out of pure instinct, but that left him wide open for an open thrust from Neji. She loved you! Neji took the opening while Naruto was still recovering, taking time to say those words while he thrust. It's been 300 years. If that's what love is all about, then she's retarded for clinging on to those feelings for so long. Naruto sneered at the other Hyuga, thrusting himself out and letting his Hierro block the strike. The Zanpakuto clanged against his chest, not even coming close to penetrating the thick Hierro. The shock of the impact traveled back up through the golden spear and through Neji's body, and it was strong enough to cause him to falter. You should have just stayed quiet, not that it would have helped you in the end. You're all going to die here, you see, Naruto advised, using his Sonido to get behind Neji. He thrust out an elbow which caught the reeling Neji in the back. The blow was strong enough to knock him away several dozen feet, where he was incapacitated for a while. What, did you think this was a performance or something? None of you even moved a muscle during that entire thing. For all the talk that you guys stick up for your comrades, were you just content with the fact that Neji might have possibly been killed? Naruto was done with Neji for now, so that only left the rest of the Konoha Association there to hold Naruto's attention for the time being. Naruto, Minato muttered. After seeing him in action, and seeing the things he was willing to do to them with his own eyes, he realized that they were all his targets. He was a fool to think that Hinata could redeem him with a few pretty words. Yet still, he exuded an uncomfortable amount of control of the situation, where he seemingly willed the entire group to just stand there, confused and unsure about what to do. A rumble of Ryatsu came from down below, which cleanly wiped the smirk off of Naruto's face. Waves of hollows were still pouring into the dimension, yet the royal guard was apparently taking care of them. They would only be distracted for so long with hollows at this level, but Naruto was hoping at least a couple of them would go down. His wish was pretty much granted when one of the extremely large Ryatsu signatures went out, no doubt a royal guard who had been overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Nevertheless, he couldn't stay here and fight all them, when the other members of the royal guard could come up at any time. He had confidence in his ability to kill one, but 6 of them at a time was far beyond his capability, and the only other Espada he could see holding his own against one of them was Ulquiorra. I'd love to rip every one of you limb from limb, but unfortunately, I have to get into the palace as soon as possible. Catch me if you can, Konoha nerds, and maybe then we'll see if you can slow me down. That seemed to be enough to jolt the group of Konoha's Shinigami out of their stupor, but by that point it was too late. Naruto's Sonido was much too quick, and with the head start he had gotten, he would have been at the palace before any of them could catch up. He stepped down near the rest of the Espada, who hadn't moved during the entire ordeal. Naruto, what did you do? Sakura asked. Oh, nothing, really. I just left them a bit of a present before we got started with the main event. Unfortunately, I don't have time to stay here and fight all of them. Ulquiorra, you're coming with me. Sakura, I suppose you can come along too. We're heading into the palace. The rest of you. He mulled over the 4 remaining Espada. 6 of them remained now. 2 of them had been killed in Soul Society, one by him, and one by his father it looked like. Would Stark, Harabel, Nitra, and Grimmjow be enough to stop them? Maybe, but his father was a real wild card. Hopefully, Stark was strong enough to capture him. Is it enough? He asked. Stop them. Kill them if you have to. I don't care anymore. But make sure that you capture Namake's Minato alive. When I'm done up in the palace, bring him to me alive. Understand? He ordered, taking good long looks at Grimmjow and Nitra, who were shaking with glee. Those 2 probably couldn't beat him anyway. The 4 Espada in front of him nodded without making a sound. Over on the other side of the road, the Konoha Shinigami had started moving, apparently in hot pursuit of the errand car. The four Espada took off, towards the apparent place that would become a battlefield for them. That left Naruto, Ulquiorra, and Sakura there at the foot of the palace, while the rest of the Royal Guard members fought through hollow after hollow down below in the vestibule road. Sakura, what do you know about the Soul King? If we activate the device he has deep within the Greater Soul King Palace, then it's likely that he would get in the way. Well, you've told me all about what El Libro de Ciclos entails, and what exactly is at the center of the Greater Soul King Palace. Obviously, you know the duties that he is required to perform, and the symbolism that his existence provides throughout Soul Society. As for his combat abilities, they are low. It is the reason that the Royal Guard exists. If you or any of the Espada were to engage him in combat, he would be extremely easy to defeat, if not somewhat harder to kill. Hold on, Sakura said after she was done explaining the purpose of the Soul King. They had come up to a strange hole in the wall of the Greater Soul King Palace, where a bluish barrier covered the entrance into what apparently was the Greater Palace. The great door to the palace. It's covered in a barrier. Just let me take care of it. She placed a hand on the barrier, dispelling the Kidu. When the blue energy dissipated, the hole allowed the three individuals access to the suspended palace, and whatever may lay inside. Who do you guys want? Stark asked. Lilinet had not let go of his pant legs since Soul Society. She had been startlingly silent during the entire ordeal, and the other Espada even forgot she was there for a while. There was something about this invasion that was bothering her, and she wasn't putting her feelings into words. Harabel, of course, did not say anything, but Grimmjow and Nitra were not paying any attention to him. The two of them were already jockeying for position, both bloodthirsty Arankar trying to be the first one to kill someone. Go sit the fuck down over there, weak-ass panther. I can handle all these fuckers by myself. Nitra hissed at Grimmjow, who didn't take too kindly to Noitra's jabs. I'd love to go over and watch these Shinigami break through your weak-ass hierro that you love so much, but I want to get in on the fighting. Don't even fucking draw your weapon. I'ma kill these bitches with one attack. All of them. Which is more than you could ever do. 10 versus 4. Harabel finally said, though it was more to Stark than to the two Arankar fighting in front her. The 10 Shinigami were pretty close to their position by this point, and the Espada needed a game plan. And we don't really know the capabilities of our opponents. The 4 Espada halted, even Grimmjow and Nitra, though the psychotic smirks were still heavily present on both of their faces. The 10 Shinigami in front of them had apparently been rushing after Naruto at the present point in time, but they were fairly surprised when they encountered the 4 Espada along the way. Grimmjow and Nitra took up the front, while Stark and Harabel were behind them a few feet, approaching the situation with a much more passive approach. They were calmly evaluating the situation. Stark, I believe I have grasped the situation, Harabel whispered, so quietly that not even Grimmjow and Nitra could hear what she was saying. What are you planning? Stark asked back. Judging by the Ryatsu of these 10 Shinigami, it's clear who the biggest threats are. The rest of the targets have a Ryatsu level that should be fairly manageable by an Espada of any rank. I feel that as the 2 highest ranking Espada present, we should isolate these larger threats from the rest of their group. You, Arankar, get out of our path immediately. We have no business with you, one of the Shinigami spoke. It was Neji, who was still seething readily over what had happened earlier. Blood from running down his temple in a small stream, a remnant from his fight with Naruto. Minato, honey, we don't have time to fight these Arankar. Did Naruto put them in our path to stall us? Kushina asked her husband, who looked very frustrated over the distraction. Don't expect them to just move out of our way, Neji. These Arankar are elite. I can tell just by looking at them that they are prized very highly by Naruto, Shikamaru pointed out. So, what do we do then? Who knows what could happen in there while we're out here fighting these Arankar? Tsunade said. Are we just gonna sit here and chat? Let's get the stupid fight started already? Grimmjow roared. He pulled his Zanpakuto from its sheath, before he stuck it in the ground. Is he gonna? Stark said suddenly. Using that move here could be problematic. Whatever it is you're gonna do, I won't let you do it. Minato roared. He went ahead of everybody else, using his advanced Shunpa to get behind Grimmjow and try to stop the attack. His sealed sword was met with another one, as Stark took rare action and blocked Minato's attack before it could hit Grimmjow. Grimmjow was too caught up in his insanity to even register what had happened. Minato! Kushina cried in worry, as she flashed directly next to her husband. We had registered you two as the premier threats here, but it seems that you've come to us. We don't have to administer any extra effort. You are already here. Kushina turned away from her husband as she registered the female voice, seeing Harabel walk up next to her. Why are you preventing me from getting to my son? Kushina asked, anger flooding her voice. She had done well to mask her old temper throughout her life as a Shinigami, but with so much on the line, it was beginning to resurface. Grimmjow, meanwhile, was still absorbed in whatever it was that had him focused. But Stark's fears were confirmed true when he took his thumb and slid it against the blade of his Zanpakuto. Hey! Why the hell would you want to use that technique right here? Nitra snarled at Grimmjow. Even he wasn't that reckless. Besides Stark, Harabel, Minato, and Kushina, every individual on the bridge was in range. Gran Rey Sero. With a smile on his face, Grimmjow shot the strong blue Sero out of his hands like a rocket. Nitra leapt out of the way from the wide beam, but the other 8 Konoha Shinigami were not expecting an attack of this caliber. Incoming! Kiba shouted. The Shinigami dodged the best they could, but they couldn't do anything to stop the beam from impacting the stone ground form where they stood. It ripped right through the stone, melting it instantly while putting a large hole in the bridge. Grimmjow was laughing maniacally. That is, until the force from his Gran Rey Sero caused cracks to splinter out all across the wide bridge they were standing. They spread out, all the way back to where Grimmjow was standing, though it wasn't just him that was in danger of falling. Nitra, and the entire Konoha Association with the exception of Minato and Kushina were in danger of falling down into the pit of hollows below. Fuck you, Grimmjow. That's what happens when you use Gran Rey Sero in this situation. Nitra screamed at him, as the ground crumbled away in front of them, sending the Sexta Espada tumbling down below into the vestibule road. What the fuck? Grimmjow had the decency to ask when the ground gave way in front of him as well, sending him tumbling down with rubble along with Nitra. The other 8 Shinigami tried to get to stable ground immediately, but their flash steps weren't advanced enough to get to safe ground, so they were sent down too. Of all 8 of them, Ichigo was the only Shinigami among the group whose flash steps were advanced enough to get to a stable portion of stone, and when he emerged, he was behind even Stark and Harabel. What are they doing? Stark asked himself, putting a frustrated palm to his face. Nevertheless, Grimmjow's reckless attack had inadvertently removed 7 targeted Shinigami from their presence, but the 3 with the strongest Ryatsu signatures remained. It doesn't matter. Our necessary target is right here, Harabel stated. Do not let him get the best of you, she ordered the higher-ranked Espada. Stark didn't even seem to care. Yeah, I got it. I'll make sure to try this time. You two, who are you? Minato asked. His mood was getting sourer and sourer the longer he was kept from confronting his son, and his wife looked like she was about to explode from rage. Tercera Espada, Coyote Stark. Stark introduced himself, with a supreme lack of passion. Quinta Espada, Tia Harabel. Harabel did the same. 3rd and 5th, huh? Both of you seem to lack many of the traits that we Shinigami define hollows as. In fact, judging from the way your appearance is and the way you carry yourself, I would say you two are the closest one can possibly get to being human while still being technically an Arrancar. Minato pointed out. What's your point? Harabel asked coldly. Why are doing this? Why are you helping my son? He asked. That is none of your concern. Shinigami like you would never understand what I owe him. I decided to follow him, no matter the consequences, no matter how evil he became. I promised I would follow him. Her fingers found her way to her uniquely shaped Zanpakuto, and she slid her index finger through the hole in the key-shaped hilt of the sword, drawing it from its sheath. If you want to reach him, you'll have to get through us first. Either way, you will see your son. You dumbass piece of shit, fish-breathed cat. Look at what the fuck you did. Nitra was livid as he moved a piece of stone off of his body. His hero had made sure that the fall had not hurt him, but with the battle around them so fierce, the two Arrancar had gotten caught up in battles with allied hollows. However, the combined Ryatsu of the two Arrancar seemed to exude the presence of a fierce predator, and as such the reaction of the other hollows was to steer clear of the espada. Right now, the hollows avoided the spot they were in out of instinct, not wanting to test the nerve of one they considered an apex predator. It was the instincts of a dog-eat-dog world, and the hollows were being tested. As such, the area where they fell was a circle that appeared like it had a natural barrier around it. The two Arrancar could fight there without any hollows getting in the way. It also meant that the 7 Konoha Shinigami could lay there in the middle of the road without automatically being swarmed by hollows. Ow. Oh man, that hurts. What the hell was that? Kiba shouted, climbing to his feet rapidly. A few scuffs and bruises were along his body, but he seemed primed and raring to go for the next fight. It looks like Minato and Kushina were left up there with those other two espada, and the rest of us were thrown down here with that attack. What do we do, Jiraiya? Tsunade asked. Well. This still doesn't work out perfectly for us. Grimmjow started. 3.5 for each of us. Don't argue about anything this time, Nitra. This is about as fair as it's gonna get. We'll take 3 of them at a time, and whoever fights the best gets to kill the last one. Yeah, whatever. I still wanna just take all 7 of these pussies and be done with it, but God knows you'll never stop bitching if I don't leave you any prey to fight. So, who are you gonna take? Grimmjow surveyed the 8 Shinigami in front of him. Him, and him, he proclaimed, pointing to Jiraiya, Shikamaru, and Neji, respectively. That left Tsunade, Ino, Rin, and Kiba for Nitra, which he did not look pleased. TCH. You leave me with all the damned women. It still feels like you're fucking insulting me. Quit your bitching, already. Do you want to fight or what? I'll kill you, you little bitch. The two espada continued to bicker, which allowed the Konoha group a chance to get a breather before taking on the two espada. To answer your question, Tsunade, it seems we've been cut off from Minato and Kushina, and the Greater Soul King Palace up above us. As much as I'd like to admire your huge knockers right now, these two espada are among the main culprits of those who invaded Siriidii. They need to be taken care of. What was that, you perverted old shit? Tsunade roared at him. The perverted little jab he had made wasn't helping. But he was right. These two Arrancar were huge threats to Soul Society, and part of the reason they had come here was to stop Naruto's army. Well, fuck, here they come anyway. We don't have much of a choice here, do we? Kiba shouted, as the lanky Nitra descended upon Tsunade. Kiba shot out a foot that connected with the sexta before he could attack the former Hokage, but the manic grin never left his face even as he was kicked away. He landed with a thud on the ground 10 feet away, but he got to his feet almost immediately, and he was snickering deviously. Is that it? That's all the force you could muster behind your attack? Kiba cried out as his leg screamed in pain from the impact. It was like kicking a steel wall. What's with this guy's skin? It nearly broke my leg. Kiba hissed, trying to walk off the injury. He didn't really have time to recover, as Nitra was in the air, his bizarre scythe-like Zanpakuto swinging over his head. The tried-and-true formula of an ally attacking Nitra didn't seem to work, until the Konoha group tried to have Tsunade intercept the Sexta Espada instead. Her fist cracked against his ribs, and for once, his hierro was broken. Tsunade had not lost any of her strength over time. Nitra flew back further this time, because the force from the punch was so much stronger. He flew back into the horde of hollows, his body weight and hierro splattering a few weak ones into paste. Nitra hissed, his stringy hair falling all over his face. His scythe-like Zanpakuto had flown from his hands, but when he got up, he looked at the Konoha Shinigami with no small amount of hatred. He pulled his Zanpakuto up from the stone ground, swinging it wildly in the direction of Tsunade, Ino, Rin, and Kiba. Nitra was still fairly slow for an Espada-level Arrancar. The 4 Shinigami nodded at each other, while Tsunade and Rin rushed Nitra using their Shunpa, while Kiba and Ino remained locked as Nitra's targets. Two Zanpakutus emerged from their sheaths, and all of a sudden, Nitra had two blades pointed at his throat from opposite angles. Nitra halted his advance, a frown settling on his face. What was that? You got your ass captured. Grimmjow roared at him from the other side of the circle. He was busy fighting Neji, Jiraiya, and Shikamaru. Shut up. I got this. He snarled back at Grimmjow, even as the two women were glaring at him with anger, their blades pointed at his throat. Don't move. This battle is over, Rin commanded. You should have just gone through and stabbed me. Not that it would do any good, but do you think this is just some kiddie crap on the playground? Huh! Nitra screamed. He then walked directly into the tips of the blades. Sparks flew as his hero underthrew underneath the pressure, and Nitra then nonchalantly lifted his Zanpakutu. Rin and Tsunade, both sensing he was about to clatter the swords from their hands, pulled away before he could initiate them in close-quarters combat. Tsunade-sama, what's with this guy's skin? Rin asked. The two women were flanking him at opposite sides, trying to make him divert his attention to one of them. Hero, an Arrancar's Ryatsu-enhanced skin makes it stronger than iron. And from the looks of things, this one has a particularly strong hero. What do we do then, Tsunade-sama? Ino asked, from over to the side. Nitra was still cracking his neck. Sprout, Shinsei no Heisu, Tsunade shouted. Instead of answering Ino's question, she otherwise gave her the answer right there, activating her shuriken immediately. Nitra raised a non-existent eyebrow when he saw what Tsunade was clutching. The blade of the Zanpakutu had disintegrated completely, being replaced by what appeared to be the large bud of a yellow flower, its closed petals on the end of the hilt. What do you plan to do with that thing? You can't expect to fight me with a stupid plant, you bitch! Nitra roared. Tsunade didn't say anything, instead opting to simply sit down like she was in a meditative stance. She raised her sword to the sky, and closed her eyes. On the end of her Zanpakutu glowed with a yellow-green Ryatsu, before it opened like a Venus flytrap. 3 vines whipped out from the interior of the Venus flytrap, but they did not veer towards Nitra. Confused, the Arrancar watched the vines seemingly continue to extend from a space that shouldn't be able to hold that length of matter. Yet the vines continued on as if they were limitless, and 3 of them embedded themselves within the backs of Rin, Kiba, and Ino. What the hell? Tsunade-sama. Don't worry about it, you two. This is Tsunade-sama's technique. Trust in her. But now, we're going to have to take the field for this one. She can't fight anymore like this, Rin told the 2 younger Shinigami. Just don't get any limbs cut off. This shuriken can't heal that. Tsunade called out to the 3 of them, maintaining her meditative stance as she controlled the vines. Well, all I know is that the blonde bitch is doing something pretty important right now, so I guess I'll just... Nitra trailed off, sailing towards Tsunade with his Zanpakutu poised to take off her head. Clatter, Ryoba no Oto! Nitra swung his Zanpakutu down even as Tsunade did not move at all or even flinch, though the metal of his Zanpakutu collided with another metal instrument that resembled a tuning fork. HGHHHHH. Nitra growled, as when he struck the tuning form, he felt slightly disoriented. Coupled that with 2 more Shinigami heading at them with vines sticking out of their backs, and things were beginning to frustrate him. As he regained his senses, he bypassed Kiba and Ino while avoiding another strike from Rin. He took advantage of the lowered guard and swung his Zanpakutu, catching Rin in the chest with a nasty slash. The woman looked surprised for a moment, though the vines in her back from Tsunade's technique allowed her to knit up the wound as if she were being reborn. Not gonna work. Not underneath Tsunade-sama's powerful healing. He brought up his Zanpakutu and blocked 3 more strikes from the Shinigami, before he got frustrated and threw them off of him. Yet when he did that, the strange sensation overcame him once again. Arg! You fucking Shinigami! Your annoying tricks are getting on my nerves. You want me to slash all of you to pieces? Huh! He snarled, raising his Zanpakutu over his head. Pray, Santa Teresa! Over on the other side of the radius, Grimmjow was not paying any attention to Nitra's struggles. He never liked the asshole anyway, so what did it matter to him if he died? Grimmjow was grinning like a lunatic as he punched Neji over and over again. His Zanpakuto was not doing him any good here, as Grimmjow was far too physically competent to be overwhelmed by it. He closed his eyes and grinned wider, drawing his Zanpakuto in a flash and avoiding a strike from Jiraiya, who had snuck up from behind him to try and get a cheap shot. Too easy. Grimmjow jumped back, actually expecting a third strike to come from somewhere else. Yet it seemed that Shikamaru wasn't actually doing anything. He had seen that Shinigami before, back when he was still under Aizen's command. He had taken him out fairly easily. Did he get stronger maybe? Then again, he seemed hesitant to jump into the fray, like he knew that he couldn't take Grimmjow on head-to-head. Perhaps he hadn't gotten much stronger after all. But Grimmjow was an Arrancar who held on to grudges for a very long time, and for that reason, he locked on to Grimmjow. I could use some more help, you guys. We've gotten into a bad situation, but right now he's only targeting me. I need some more time to think up a suitable strategy to fight this guy. I've got it. Croak, Gamma no Yuta! Jiraiya roared. Jiraiya's katana began to change shape as what appeared to be a replica of a toad appeared on the Zanpakuto's guard, making it look like the blade was protruding out of the toad's mouth. As he released his shuriken, his katana became glazed in what seemed to be a sickly greenish fluid, much like phlegm. What the hell is that? Grimmjow asked. Let me ask you something, Arrancar. Have you ever had the pleasure of being digested by a toad's stomach? Jiraiya asked. A bit of the fluid fell off of the blade, and when the droplet hit the stone floor, it began to instantly corrode. What was coating Jiraiya's sword was highly concentrated stomach acid. Jiraiya-sama, you're the only one who can possibly stand up to him, Neji shouted. He was heavily bruised, despite using his shuriken on him. His failed to stop the Arrancar. You weak-ass Shinigami think you can stop me? Even with your shitty sword, Grimmjow said, mocking Jiraiya's shuriken. Allow me to show you just what I can do. He drew his Zanpakuto and held it aloft, pointing the tip of the blade back at himself. The three Shinigami winced when they realized what he was about to do. Grimmjow raked his fingers over the back end of the blade, allowing it to glow a light blue. Grind, Pantera! Ichigo had left Minato and Kushina behind. It wasn't like he had wanted to leave them there, but they had reassured him that they would handle the two Espada that were left on the bridge with them. He had already gotten a head start, so he was meant to catch up with Naruto and Ulquiorra. He had the power. He could see them now, at the entrance to the Greater Soul King Palace. Naruto! The human-turned Shinigami roared, as the three individuals in front of the palace halted. Naruto turned around first, and his eyes snapped open when he saw Ichigo running directly at him. Ulquiorra, he hissed, to which the Segunda nodded and drew his Zanpakuto. There was a flash of movement, and Ulquiorra stopped Ichigo, who had swung his giant butcher knife Zanpakuto at Naruto, which was then promptly blocked by Ulquiorra's own sword. Ulquiorra! Ichigo yelled, as Naruto and Sakura disappeared into the palace. Ulquiorra barely acknowledged Ichigo's presence, as if he were little more than a bug to be crushed. Kurosaki Ichigo, you're alive, he commented. No thanks to you and Naruto. Evidently. You were a thorn in our side back at Las Noches. It would be illogical of us to assist you, he said, breaking the contact with Ichigo's sword. Ichigo looked at him dangerously. Get out of my way, Ulquiorra. I need to reach Naruto. I cannot do that. Then I'll force my way through, Ichigo roared, holding his butcher knife out. Bankai! Ugh! Stark grunted as he was pushed back by Minato. He had ordered Lilynette to get behind him while he fought the Shinigami, and he had not allowed him to get to her. Both he and Minato remained in their sealed state, but Stark was having trouble against the 5th Division captain regardless. Haribel was also having similar troubles over to the side, against Kushina. Stark. I know, Lilynette. This is getting to be far too much. I'm sorry, but it looks like we're going to have to go through with our pain in the ass release, he told his second half. Yeah, she called back. The blonde Shinigami in front of them raised an eyebrow, nonchalantly twirling his sealed Zanpakuto around in his hands. Our release? I didn't realize that Erankars shared a Zanpakuto release. They don't. Most of them don't, at least. Most Erankar, including those who have risen to become Espada level, seal the core of their powers into the form of a sword. But ours is a little bit different. When we release our Zanpakuto, he trailed off, as Lilynette came up beside him. We become one once more, he said, placing a hand upon her mask. Kick, Los Lobos. Minato watched nonchalantly as Stark was engulfed in a pillar of blue Ryatsu. Gleam, Kuroi Senko. Minato said softly, releasing his long blade of energy in order to combat Stark. Meanwhile, the dust surrounded Stark began to settle, and a blue Sero was fired out of the cloud almost immediately. Minato sliced it in half without a second thought. Oi, Lilynette! Don't fire without my permission! He was wide open, though. I'm not like you, who just wants to take a nap and not do anything. There was a crack, and a loud owl resounded throughout the high road, as Stark emerged from the cloud and landed on the ground. Lilynette was nowhere to be seen. Just shut up. This pain in the ass release needs you to act like a normal gun, and only fire when told. Stark said. He was talking to the pistol in his right hand. Minato narrowed his eyes. This was the first time he had seen an Erankar's resurrection, but he had thought it would be more hollow-like. Other than the hole in his chest and mask eye patch, there wasn't really much that distinguished him for a hollow. Though, those fur leggings he wore reminded him of a wolf's, and may very well be tied to his hollow form. An interesting release. Am I correct in assuming those pistols are your other half? Minato asked. Stark didn't dignify him with a response, instead, raising his right pistol at him. Another strong blue Sero rocketed at the 5th Division's captain, though Minato was quick. Kami no Kyutai! Minato shouted. The tip of his Zanpakuto glistened with yellow light, before a yellow ball similar to a Sero broke off from the rest of his sword. Whichever direction Minato swung his sword, that was the direction that the orb would travel. And it seemed to be made of a very malleable type of energy, as it sometimes broke off into tiny blips of light. When Stark rapid-fired a bunch of Seros at him, Minato swung his sword and then the several blips of light intercepted the blue Seros. After the sequence was done, Minato conjured up another deity's orb from his sword to place the old one. You call my release interesting, but it seems that your sword does a similar thing. Stark called, using Sonito to get underneath Minato's guard. The former Hokage was slightly faster than him though, and Stark was forced to flip over a counterattack from Minato's beamed sword. Stark fired twin Seros to dismantle the stream of energy that continued flying at him, planting his feet on the ground after he landed. Stark, you suck. You can't even keep up with him, Lilynette said. Just shut up and keep shooting. Stark shot back, firing several more times at Minato. The captain avoided them every time, before opting to try his luck with close-quarters combat. He swung his energy sword at Stark from close range, figuring the Erankar would be woefully unprepared due to his weapon choice. That wasn't the case, as Stark swiftly holstered his pistols and retracted 2 blue energy swords out of thin air. He met Minato midway with his right sword, ducking to the side at the trail of Riryoku that came off Minato's blade. He noticed the deity's orb behind his head a little too late. Like how he had done to many different opponents, the point-blank beam grazed him on the back as he tried to avoid it, creating a shallow wound. TCH! He hissed, gritting his teeth. His energy swords disappeared, and Minato was ripe for the opportunity and the opening that the wound created. But Stark was quick, and he drew his pistols, firing twin Seros at Minato, who was the middle of his attacking motion. Minato's Zanpakuto wasn't known for its defensive qualities, but it managed to redirect the majority of the Seros. But the bright light had disoriented Minato, and now the tables were turned. Without even thinking, he swung his Zanpakuto in a sweeping motion behind himself, creating another trail of yellow energy. Based on the sound, he knew he had hit Stark, and he had swung his sword based on how he heard movement. Man, do you ever drop your guard? The Erankar asked in an annoyed tone, as Minato turned around. There was another wound on Stark, this time over his leggings. Minato smiled. I won't, not until you let me get past. Stark seemed to regard his words for a moment, before he sighed. Ugh, this isn't getting us anywhere. Our fighting styles are far too similar. If I fire a Sero at you, you'll just counter it with that ball of light, and vice versa. We need something to shake up the tides a bit. What do you suggest? Minato asked. Stark said nothing. At least, he did not say anything to Minato. Well, Lilinet, let's put away the guns for a little while. Looks like we have no choice but to use the wolves. Attack, Tiburon! Like her Espada comrade off to the side of the bridge, Harabelle had been having quite some difficulty with her own opponent, one Uzumaki Kushina of the 3rd Division. The 3rd Division captain fought nothing like her husband, doing a flurry of wild and reckless sword attacks that focused on nothing but offensive capability. Kushina had been attacking her earlier, but the Shinigami had been pushed back by the cascade of water that went along every time Harabelle released her Zanpakuto. Usually when an Erincar released their Zanpakuto, then their armor or clothing expanded. However, in the case of Harabelle, it was the opposite, and she became more streamlined. The bony hollow armor that covered Harabelle's body was very minimalist, covering only her breasts and crotch, with twin spikes protruding out of her shoulders. Even her face mask was mostly gone now, but she did have arm and leg guards to make up for it. In her right arm was an enormous blade that served as her main weapon, and it took the shape of a massive shark's fin with a hole in the center that was the shark's eye. Damn, honey, you look like a whore. Are you sure you don't just want to let me by? An obnoxious voice that belonged to Kushina told her from about 20 feet away. Outside of battle, Kushina was generally a pretty affable woman, but in combat, she was downright merciless. I'm afraid I cannot do that. I can't allow you to enter the Greater Palace and reach Naruto, Harabelle told her. Kushina shook her head wistfully, making humming noises with her mouth. Such a shame. And you have such a pretty face. But if you're so insistent, she trailed off. Her sword was a katana with a blood-red hilt, and she was currently twirling it around in her hands. Puncture, Akashi! Almost immediately, Kushina's blade exploded in a burst of blood-red ryatsu. After the display, Harabelle began to notice that the water around her was beginning to heat up, rapidly reaching its boiling point. Kushina grinned almost demonically as the red wreath gave her the visage of some kind of devil. She was waving her bladeless Zanpakuto around, but her shirk-eye was beginning to materialize. For one, the hilt and guard also began to disappear as the rest of the shirk-eye began to form. But Harabelle raised an eyebrow when all that happened was what looked like a puddle of blood materialized out of thin air and splattered all against the ground. Is this some kind of joke? She asked. As much as I love pranks, no. This is no time to be pulling pranks. I'm afraid I am very serious right now. Kushina shot back. She looked ridiculous when she shot her hand out, concentrating on the puddle of blood in front of her. Ryatsu welled up from within its depths, and the blood began to rise as if it were being controlled. Kushina wiggled her fingers and moved her hands around somewhat, and the now fully formed stream of blood responded like a whip, moving around in every which direction. What is that? Harabelle asked, while Kushina twirled the blood whip around her head. Kushina just hummed a happy little tune before she lashed out with the whip. Harabelle responded in turn, spewing a vicious jet of water to protect herself. Lo and behold, though, the water began to boil until it had completely turned into the steam, and Harabelle was forced to dodge on her own. Yet, when the blood whip impacted the ground, the stone bridge began to melt, until it became liquid. It's boiling, just like my Hirvienda. But it looks like she has a far greater sense of control over that whip. Harabelle thought to herself. Kushina had retracted her whip back into the puddle by her feet, though. What's wrong? Is it getting a little too hot for you? She asked. Harabelle said nothing, instead just raising her shark-finned sword. Cascada. A torrent of water rose overhead in a streaming pillar, ready to topple across the battlefield and onto Kushina. When it was clear the attack was going to hit, Kushina did some more trickery with the magic puddle of blood at her feet. She twirled the whip over her head, before expanding it outward, forming a sort of umbrella over Kushina. The blood was hot enough to boil the water away into steam upon contact, leaving Harabel's attack completely wasted. Harabel herself touched back down onto the ground. That liquid is boiling at an extremely high temperature. Anything less would not be able to boil my cascada down to steam, she commented, suddenly very wary of the abilities of Kushina's Shurikai. That's right. And it will only get worse for you from here on end, Kushina said dangerously, forming the stream of blood back into its default whip-like shape. Shiketsu. Kushina controlled the blood whip to form a stream around Harabel, propelling around her and preventing any movement or escape. The Quinta watched on with sullen eyes, pondering what her opponent was playing at. After that was done, the blood whip hung over her head like an ominous rain cloud, and dispersed into several droplets of the boiling blood, which rained down upon the espada. Harabel got out of the way too little too late. Although she managed to avoid most of the lethal droplets, a few managed to find their way onto her body at various places. One on her right leg, one on her hip, and one more on her right shoulder. Harabel winced in pain as the hot blood began to burn her skin, but she was even more alarmed when she saw the blood begin to seep underneath her pores and into her body. And it continued to burn her muscles. Ugh! She cried in pain, as she felt herself begin to bleed underneath her skin, creating multiple bruises and splotches over where the drops had leaked into her body. Those droplets of blood are practically poison to your body. They will tear down your muscles until they are completely useless, Kushina told the Arrancar. It burned Harabel badly, but she wasn't done just yet. Using her shark fin blade, she cut rough patches of her own body out, releasing the deadly blood while also seriously injuring herself. A smart move, though it won't be enough. Harabel didn't say anything, but she charged Kushina. Getting into a close-quarters battle might favor her, though Kushina blocked several strikes and pressurized jets of water with extreme skill with her bloody whip. When the whip made contact with Harabel's fin, the bony material that made up the sword began to fizzle and burn, actually catching fire. Harabel grit her teeth as the fire spread, though she did not give up. Despite the burning, she followed with several quick and nimble strikes with the burning weapon, one of them catching Kushina's hip and searing her flesh. The 3rd Division captain hissed and backed off, her blood whip retreating into the puddle as she clutched her burn wound. Harabel also backed off, trying to find some way to put out the fire. She called water up from her shark's sword, dousing the flames while wincing at the wound that had been created. She had at least been able to inflict a wound and slow down Kushina. I understand now. It will not be an easy task defeating you. And so, I will use my full abilities. She raised her shark fin, and bring you to Naruto, she finished. Yellow Ryatsu surrounded her entire form. Resurrección, segunda etapa, Tiburón,